at right now, which is of interest to you, not just as a person, but as an artist, creator?
I'm looking at it as a person at the moment. I'm not thinking of making art out of it. I'm thinking of the terrible pain. It's not only am I Jewish and come from South Africa, I've actually been to the West Bank and I've seen apartheid, and I recognize it because I've seen it in my past.
We must end there, but Gillian Slovo, thank you very much for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great...
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live in downtown Winnipeg and broadcasting all across Manitoba. And thank you for joining us on 89.3, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Thanks to Chloe Friesen, who was here yesterday filling in for me. Appreciate that. And I believe it may have been Emily Brass on Friday or Faith Fundal. I'm just going to start thanking everyone. In Winnipeg today, we're expecting a high of 19 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. Of course, it's going to be decent. The long weekend's over. What a mixed bag of weather we have this weekend. Well, thanks for being with us. We're on air till 8:37 with your morning show. Let's say hi to the team. Brad Lilly is in the control room. Good morning. Good morning to Corey Funk as well. Corey directs the program and will cover the commute on air. Good morning, Abby Adeyemi, who's behind the controls of the show, and will also cover our weather forecast on the air through the morning. Heather Wells is in also this Tuesday morning, and she's here now to tee up our headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, developers looking to build affordable housing in Winnipeg could get money from the city. A recent report proposes a new grant program. It would offer incentives for affordable housing and projects downtown. Support could add up to $60,000 a unit. We'll hear more about that. And it wasn't the start the Winnipeg Blue Bombers may have hoped for, but Coach Mike O'Shea says yesterday's preseason loss in Regina gave him a chance to assess some of the young players. Many of the season starters did not play. In the end, the Blue and Gold lost to the Riders 25-12. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, in the program today, I was mentioning the weather. We have these storm systems move and through the province really Thursday to Sunday. Very unsettled, right? Rain, then hail, then sun, then humidity, then cold. And what about the tornado warnings on Thursday? It has a lot of people wondering about how prepared you really are in your own home and family to take care of an emergency situation, or rather should one arise. We're going to have a conversation this morning with the Canadian Red Cross all about that. Also, we're going to look at new research that's out now focused on homelessness and older adults specifically. Experts are talking about it being a problem that is only continuing to grow, so stay tuned for that conversation. And a little bit later, a really nice little story that students are hoping will create action rather for their neighborhood. Some students in the Maples, Garden City, and Amber Trails are trying to push the city to plant more trees in their neighborhoods. Stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Joyner Lucas is a twice Grammy-nominated rapper that tackles pretty big subjects in his music. Self-harm, addiction, police brutality, racism. He joins me in studio to talk about his new album and trying to make a difference through hip-hop.
I want to just tell you I love you in case that you really don't hear it as much.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Statistics Canada is expected to release the latest inflation data this morning. It could be crucial in deciding when the Bank of Canada chooses to start cutting interest rates. Our senior business correspondent, Peter Armstrong, has more.
Canada's rate of inflation has been steadily falling. Since the peak in 2022, it's marched in a fairly straight line back toward the Bank of Canada's target of 2%. Economists like BMO's Doug Porter believe today's numbers will at least hold the line.
This report is definitely a big one. It may well decide whether the Bank Canada cuts in early June.
Today's report, though, will be a touch messy. Gasoline prices are up 7%, but compared to a year ago, they're down slightly. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem has made it clear for a while now he's looking beyond the headline.
As we consider how much longer to hold the policy rate at the current level, we're looking for evidence that the recent further easing in underlying inflation will be sustained.
Porter thinks that headline year-over-year rate will fall to 2.8%. Core inflation measures that strip out more volatile components are also expected to ease.
Is that good enough to get them to cut? They've talked about sustained improvement. I don't know if this is sustained enough. I think the waters are a little bit murky here.
Whatever the numbers say, they'll shape the economic landscape for months to come. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Philadelphia today. Speaking at a union summit, Trudeau is expected to talk about the importance of Canada-U.S. trade and the strong ties between the two countries. Canadian government ministers are spending a lot of time in the United States. They're watching the upcoming election in November and Donald Trump's possible return to the White House. Tom Perry reports.
Pleased to meet you, Minister Champagne.
Nice to meet you, Minister.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you.
you.
Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne on a trip this month into the American heartland. Nebraska, a state where nearly 60% of voters supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election.
There's never been a better time for Canada and the United States and Nebraska to work together.
Champagne is the government's point man as it prepares for this year's U.S. election and the possibility of a second Trump White House. He's not the only minister spending time south of the border. Defense Minister Bill Blair and Treasury Board President Anita Anand were in Washington last week showing the flag, part of what the government calls its Team Canada strategy. Laura Dawson is executive director of the Future Borders Coalition. She says the government needs to be ready for whatever comes of the U.S. election and can't appear to be taking sides.
It cannot be MAGA bad, Democrat good. It cannot be framed in partisan terms. It's got to be framed as Canada is your ally and your trusted partner on security, prosperity, and the strength of the North American region.
Justin Trudeau is expected to stick to that theme today as he speaks at a union summit to delegates from both Canada and the U.S. and delivers a familiar message that the two countries are stronger when they work together. Tom Perry, CBC News, Philadelphia.
Singapore Airlines says one person died after one of its planes encountered severe turbulence mid-flight. The flight left from London's Heathrow Airport en route to Singapore yesterday. The airline says the plane diverted to Thailand after the turbulence. It landed mid-afternoon local time today in Bangkok. Singapore Air says there were other injuries on board. In Iran, several funerals for President Ibrahim Raisi are happening today. State media shows thousands of people joined a funeral procession in the streets of Tabriz. Pro-establishment officials are encouraging everyone to participate. Iran is in the middle of 5 days of mourning for Raisi. He and several others were killed when their helicopter crashed in poor weather this weekend. France and Belgium are expressing their support for the International Criminal Court. The chief prosecutor requested arrest warrants for Hamas leaders and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel and the United States immediately condemned the move. Now France says it supports the World Court's independence and the fight against impunity. Today in Surrey, BC, 4 Indian nationals will appear in court. They are facing conspiracy and murder charges in the death of a prominent Sikh Canadian activist. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot and killed last June, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the Indian government may have been involved. Philip Lee Shannock has the latest.
We were able to gather significant evidence that led us to the individuals.
RCMP Superintendent Mandeep Mukher says 3 men arrested in Alberta and 1 who is already in custody in Ontario are just the beginning. He says the investigation into the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is ongoing and involves police across Canada and internationally.
And these efforts include investigating connections to the Government of India.
The 4 men are accused of conspiracy to commit murder. The Sikh Canadian activist was fatally shot outside his Surrey, BC Gurdwara last June. Investigators say it was a political assassination on behalf of the Government of India. Cash Heed is the former chief of the West Vancouver Police Department. He also served as BC's Solicitor General. He says the 4 men were involved in organized crime.
Whether they were associated with a Bishnoi gang or some other organized crime group, they're basically guns for hire.
And he suspects the men are connected to other crimes across the country, including extortions in Ontario, Alberta, and BC. But he says investigators have work to do on the Niger case.
That theory of connecting it right back to the Indian government is going to be very difficult.
If 4 nationals did kill a citizen on Canadian soil at the direction of a foreign government, it would be a violation of international law. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
In Alberta, deaths from a toxic drug supply are record-breaking. The data for 2023 show another spike in the number of people who died from an overdose. The province is trying to focus on recovery in its approach to mental health and addictions. But as Madeline Smith reports, the need in the community is more urgent than ever.
We've been experiencing a sort of endless wave.
More than 2,000 people in the province died from drug poisonings last year, the highest annual total ever, with the vast majority of deaths due to opioids. No surprise to Edmonton ER doctor Warren Thirsk.
Wave after wave of overdose deaths in our emergency departments across the province.
And a cycle of tragedy that never stops repeating for Petra Schultz with advocacy group Moms Stop the Harm.
I see the grieving mothers and families rather than the numbers.
A spokesperson for the Provincial Minister of Mental Health and Addictions says the number of deaths is concerning. Their focus is on a system that supports recovery. While Schultz says more treatment options are needed,
we have to keep people alive, and that's where the province of Alberta is failing.
In Edmonton, homeless support agency Boyle Street Community Services is trying to open a new overdose prevention hub, but it's been waiting on city permits for more than a year. Boyle Street's Elliot Tanti.
We need on-the-ground supports with people on a daily basis. And I think the overdose prevention site on the south side is just the start of that.
The province says in the first 2 months of this year, the number of opioid deaths actually declined compared to the same period in 2023, and officials are cautiously optimistic the trend will continue. Madeline Smith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Many Canadians are willing to pay a hefty premium to get speedy home delivery, but some say Canada Post is not keeping up their end of the bargain. One Alberta man had to take matters into his own hands when a mail carrier made no effort to deliver his package or see if anyone was home. And as Brian Labby reports, this is not an isolated incident.
A Canada Post carrier slips a notice into Josh Kralka's mailbox. Not the parcel he was tracking and expecting.
I checked my security footage, didn't even attempt to knock or ring the doorbell at all.
Kralka got in his car to try to track down the carrier and his parcel.
I found the mailman.
Their conversation was short.
He apologized and said, "Oh yeah, well here it is. It's in the car."
In a statement, Canada Post says it's sorry and the package should have been delivered. The local union leader also apologized, saying a lack of resources and proper training may be to blame.
I can tell you it happened to me personally only 3 weeks ago.
Ian Lee is an associate professor at Carleton University who studied the rise and fall of Canada Post.
It was annoying. I was home.
Lee has long advocated for a shake-up at Canada Post, which lost nearly $750 million last year. He says the Crown Corporation must focus solely on parcels and e-commerce.
Canada Post is either going to reform and restructure to occupy that space, or they won't and they will die.
Kralka, meantime, isn't so sure that he'll pay the extra fee next time for faster delivery. Brian Labby, CBC News, Red Deer, Alberta.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, how's this for a mixed bag of sky conditions in Manitoba? Right now, this hour, we have light snow in Thompson, we have mist in Norway House, we have sunshine in Churchill, and we also have fog in parts of the province as well around Portage. Just a mixed bag. In Winnipeg, we are right now sitting at 8 degrees. And that's where we're sitting in our studios downtown on Portage Avenue. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and this is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or YouTube. This hour on the program, speaking of the weather, last week's tornado warnings across Thursday in southern Manitoba might have you wondering if you're really prepared should extreme weather continue, and it's likely to. We're going to hear from the Canadian Red Cross about that. That's coming up this hour. In addition, there's new research focused on homelessness and older adults specifically. Experts say it's a problem that is continuing to grow, so we'll dig into what some of the issues are and also what some of the solutions might be. First, though, let's go to Heather Wells in our news center. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the impact of the Birchwood Terrace evacuation in St. James is being felt by neighbors still. People in 30 homes surrounding the now empty apartment complex are on evacuation alert. They were told to be ready to leave their homes with little notice. This after an inspection found serious structural deterioration in columns of that apartment building's parkade. We'll hear more about what's going on there now. And affordable housing projects in Winnipeg could get a financial boost from the city. A recently proposed grant program would offer incentives of up to $60,000 a unit to downtown projects, all part of the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. I'll be back with more details coming up at 6:30.
How was your long weekend? I know you were working yesterday, but how was the May long?
It was lovely. It was, I heard you talking earlier this morning about the mixed bag of weather.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that rain on, what was that, Saturday was insane.
Wasn't it weird? I found that it was sort of the strangest thing for me was how much it was flipping back and forth.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, now it's nice out. Hang on, sun's gone again. Now there's rain. Oh,
and
wait
it
a
would
minute.
come down hard.
Yeah.
I got caught in it twice.
Oh, did you? Did you get hail?
No hail.
Okay, I did get hail. So this was more Thursday night, going back to that, because we had a number of different systems Thursday through today, right? It was just strange everywhere. People posting their photos and talking about out and about. Now, the strange thing about the weather this week, let's just make that turn, is it's going to be cold overnight. So if you were one of those people like I was that was hitting up all the garden centers, be careful what you put in the ground and in the pots. Someone a long time ago told me, Abby Adiyemi, that in Manitoba, you usually want to wait till June 1st. So I'm pushing it a bit myself, but...
I agree. You have to wait till June 1st because last week I have people that are still like mourning the loss of some plants they brought out like on Monday. So I would say just wait till June.
And it's going to be hard because today's going to be really nice and you're going to want to plant.
It's going to tempt you. It's tempting. But if you're stepping out today, I would advise you, like Mercy mentioned, it's kind of chilly outside, so you might want to grab a jacket. Right now in Winnipeg, it's 8 degrees. As we move through the day, the city will experience a mix of sun and clouds, and then some winds would peak up, becoming a north near the noon period. Now, the high for today, we will reach 19 degrees, so it's going to be relatively mild with some sunshine peeking through the clouds. And if you look downtown now, we're already seeing those sunshine on the sides of the building. Looking ahead into tonight, the skies will remain cloudy, and then there's a chance of showers late this evening into the overnight period. And let's just say the summary for today, a mix of sun and clouds, a little bit on the cooler side. The normal high for this time of the year is 21, but today we are headed to a high of 19. Still cloudy, and we'll get to 10 tonight. It's kind of cool.
10 will be like right on the edge there. It's later in the week when we get to 3 and 2 overnight.
3 and 2, and
you can
Brandon,
feel the plants shivering in that.
And Brandon will be getting a risk of a thunderstorm today, so also put that in the bag.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
It's a big bag of stuff he's given us. Corey Funk, good morning.
Good morning. My Baba's wisdom, June 10th. Never plants before then.
June 10th,
Yeah,
eh?
and she's a big plant lady, and she said anytime before that, there's always risk of frost, and that's coming from an 83-year-old lady who's been planting for years.
I guess I'm going to have to be babysitting my plants inside. The commute this morning, what do we know?
Yeah, it's been pretty straightforward this morning. Things are looking smooth. I mean, a reminder to folks who were driving up north, I'm sure it's no surprise to residents up there, but the Highway 10 around Cranberry Portage, it was closed earlier from Baker's Narrows to the intersection with Highway 39. That's just south of Flin Flon there. That is now reopened. You can drive there. There is no fire-related closures on Highway 10 now. But if you do see something going on out on the highways or here in Winnipeg, give me a call if you're walking, biking, and driving. We'd love to hear from you. 204-788-3093.
Well, if all that chat wasn't enough about the changing weather, we've also entered tornado season here in our province. Last week's tornado warnings in southern Manitoba might have some people wondering if they're really prepared for it. Tornado warnings were issued for rural municipalities all across south central Manitoba Thursday as storms brought rain, hail, and strong shifting winds to Manitoba. Now, on average in our province, 8 to 12 tornadoes touch down every year. The Canadian Red Cross recommends having a safety plan and an emergency kit ready to go in case of a tornado or other emergency. And Jason Small's up early with us this morning, spokesperson with the Canadian Red Cross. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Marcy.
Wild weather over the weekend, huh? Just crazy.
Yes. I was driving around on Thursday and did see cars pass by me with large amounts of hail in their windshield. So yes, it was a very wild day.
What's the you obviously Red Cross responds to all kinds of different disasters and issues. What is it like when you think about tornado emergency preparedness? Just to start there, because I was talking about it, versus other preparedness.
Well, for all emergencies, we recommend households have an emergency plan. But with tornadoes, part of that emergency plan is thinking about what do you do in the home if you hear that there's a tornado warning? Where do you go? And, we recommend that you pick a place in the home, preferably a basement or else away from any exterior walls, windows, or doors, the place for the family to go if there is a tornado warning and feel like the tornado may be imminent, and then practice that as a family. Make sure everybody knows where to go when that might happen. That's one of the biggest things, is just to keep in mind when you're making that emergency plan, think about tornadoes. And that's the thing we really recommend, is when you're doing your emergency planning, know what the potential risks are where you live. So in the summer, for us here in Manitoba, tornadoes, wildfires, floods, these are some of the major things to think about. And that's just part of it, but that's a big part of when you're making that emergency plan.
Do you think that people forget to think about outside of the home? Because the home is one thing, but there's other plans that you might have to think about if you're separated from family, or if you happen to get caught in something outdoors, or, you need to know your neighborhood in a way. You need to understand structures.
Absolutely. We say that part of the things when you're making your emergency plan, think about not just in the home, but also if you are separated as a family, where are you going to meet? Who might you be able to stay with, or what home might you go to? Also, with your neighborhood, know your neighborhood and maybe know somewhere else you could go, or also maybe somebody in your neighborhood, possibly an older person who might need help, and you might want to check on just to make sure they're okay too. It is important as a family to know that if we do get separated, how are we going to reconnect? Where are we going to reconnect? And that's all part of that emergency planning.
What should be in the emergency kit?
The emergency kit should have what a family or household is going to need for the first 72 hours after a disaster. So that might include things like water in a collapsible container, non-perishable food, maybe granola bars, protein bars, canned food. If you have canned food, make sure you have a manual can opener. We also recommend having either battery or crank-operated radio, so people can listen to warnings on the radio about what are potential issues that might still be coming, or where status is for weather. It's important to have special needs for your family. That's the biggest thing, is your emergency kit needs to be tailored to the household. So do you need certain medications? Do you need an extra pair of glasses? Make sure you have important family documents like birth certificates, ID, land deeds, insurance papers, stuff like that. And also, beyond that, maybe extra clothes, extra keys for the house, a first aid kit, extra cash, personal hygiene items, pet food or pet medication if you have four-legged members of the family, maybe a cell phone, or just an extra battery charger or batteries. So there's a lot of things that people can think about, and we have quite an extensive list on our website at redcross.ca/be-ready.
Just last, how often would you recommend people, obviously you're going to want to update your kit, not just have it sitting there for, years on end and then everything's outdated, but after you have your kit together and such, what about practicing your plan with your family? How often do you recommend people do that?
Yeah, it's something as a family, think about what makes sense, but I mean, I'd say at least every few months, check that kit, make sure things haven't expired. Also, make sure everybody in the family knows where to find that kit so they can just grab it and go. And yeah, also practice that. And especially as we talked about that component for tornadoes, practice where to go. And just go through that kit as a family where you would muster outside the home. And do it every few months. Just so it's fresh in the minds of everybody, so that you're confident that if something bad does happen, you and all your family members know what to do.
I know you've been with the Red Cross for a long time, Jason. We've talked many times over the years. What's keeping you guys busy right now in the biggest way?
I think the biggest thing right now is preparing for what might be coming in the coming months. And across the country, we've already been in action helping people in different provinces with dealing with wildfires. But, it could be anything. And we're prepared for anything. We have a fantastic team of staff and volunteers who are making sure that here in Manitoba, we're prepared in case any disaster does happen and we are needed to assist.
Well, we'll talk to you again. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Great. Thanks, Marcy. You too.
That's Jason Small, spokesperson with the Canadian Red Cross.
Whether you're hanging out or out on the move, stay in the know with CBC Listen. The cost of living with Paul Havershrud goes beyond facts and figures.
Real estate is the 800-pound gorilla of Canada's economy.
And What on Earth with Laura Lynch explores the climate change crisis, problems and solutions.
What happened that made you start to think and see climate change differently?
The Cost of Living and What on Earth. Available now on CBC Listen.
Danse, Anine, Boujou, and hello. It's me, your favorite cousin, Rosanna Deerchild. Guess what? Unreserved is turning 10. That's like 100 in Res Dog years. And to celebrate, we're inviting you to a live taping of Unreserved, May 22nd at the Park Theatre in Winnipeg on Treaty 1 territory. Sherry McKay, Doozy, and Unreserved's Auntie Circle will all be there. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and click on the link to register.
Well, speaking of Unreserved, in case you've been missing some of the conversations, the end of the world is one of the conversations they had. Now, it's been predicted many times over. Let me explain this. We're talking Y2K, stock market crashes, the COVID-19 pandemic. Those are all examples of moments and events that led people to believe that life as we know it was coming to an end. The blackout of August 14th, 2003, so go way back to that year, when electricity went out for most of Ontario and many parts of northeastern U.S., is another example. Now, that's a day that is stuck in the memory of Anishinaabe author Wabgisha Rice. Wab's a writer and former CBC journalist from Waksucking First Nation near Parry Sound. And of course, he worked here in Manitoba for many years. But last October, he followed up his best-selling novel, Moon of the Crusted Snow, with a sequel, Moon of the Turning Leaves. The books were inspired by that hot day in 2003 in August, when all the lights went out. And he says he thought life on Earth was changed forever. But as Wab learned from his grandmother in a conversation a year after the blackout, his people had faced world-ending situations.
And I said, yeah, Graham, that blackout, that was pretty wild, eh? I was like, I thought it was the end of the world. And she's like, oh, the end of the world, She's like, oh, that's already happened to all of us, so many times, right? And she reminded me, like, where we're from, our people, our res is an island on Georgian Bay. But our people originally inhabited the mainland, and they freely walked, along the shore of Lake Huron until Indian Affairs interpreted the Robinson-Huron Treaty to say that, no, you can't do that anymore. You have to go down to this island, and that's where you're going to live forever kind of thing. So it was really confinement to, like, essentially what the government wanted to be an open-air prison, essentially, right? And then everything else followed, and my grandma reminded me of that. So like, with that, lived experience, her grandparents' generation were the ones who were originally removed. That's just a few generations removed from me, right? So that perspective was really crucial. And I was like, well, if you look around us and see what some of us have been able to revive and maintain, it's really inspirational. Of course, there's still a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma. There's still a lot of things that need to be repaired. But looking at what we have now in the aftermath of the apocalypse is wonderful if you think about it, And now people are empowered to really work harder to restore a lot of those things. with the full knowledge that this is, objectively a dystopia, Canada, for a lot of Indigenous people. If like languages are gone, customs are gone in many places. So I think trying to flip that script and show what we've been able to do is not necessarily like utopic, but, it is more hopeful, as you say, and hopefully, it can allow people that perspective to feel triumph and joy again.
Well, Bryce, Anishinaabe author from Wissahickon First Nation, who now lives in Sudbury. In conversation, that's part of a conversation on Unreserved that he had with host Rosanna Deerchild. Now, just one more reminder, if you want to check it out, Unreserved Live is coming up this week, tomorrow. It's happening, so check out details online for that show. 6:26 a.m., it's 8 degrees, it's mostly cloudy in Winnipeg, and we have now connected with our next guest for a conversation about what's happening with homelessness in this country and a new study that looks at the aging population and the affordability crisis. Experts are sounding alarm bells over the number of older adults in the shelter system. And according to a new study I'm mentioning, this group of people over the age of 50 includes many who are experiencing homelessness for the first time later in life. Dr. Stefan Baral is with us, family population health physician at Inner City Health Initiatives. It's a nonprofit organization in Toronto that offers services for people on the street and shelters and those who are precariously housed. And we just have a couple of minutes to touch some of the details from this study. And he joins us by Zoom. Hi there.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So can you put this in context for us? How big of a problem is this, a concern? Seniors, older adults in shelters?
Well, I think, what we realize that Canadians on average are getting older, but what we've seen, having provided clinical care in the shelter system for the last 15 years, is that the number of folks who are ending up homeless as older adults is outgrowing that. And it's happening out of proportion. And so broadly, there are these sort of three groups of folks who've been chronically homeless for more than 10 years and who are getting older within the shelter system. But there are many folks who are, lived stably, worked their entire lives, ending up homeless for the first time. And then there are many folks who are new to Canada, recently arrived and ending up in the shelter system, disproportionately so at older ages.
Now, so in the past, we've heard where people will sort of, they lose the benefits from working, they thought they'd saved enough, prescriptions start to add up, and then they may find themselves in more poverty than they had experienced. But what are we understanding now about why people are ending up in that situation?
Well, I think, many folks, they lived and worked independently. They had homes. Often it is the case that they're not able to manage the home anymore. They might have been widowed. They can't manage stairs in homes, and the homes get sold, and then they end up in apartments. And, in the context of cognitive decline, sometimes existing mental health issues and mobility issues, folks can end up getting evicted, and that happens. I see folks in clinic who are as confused about why they're in the shelter system as we are, because it happens very quickly. Within a few months, they can go from having an apartment and all being well to having nothing, because their stuff has been thrown out and they've been evicted from their apartments. And again, I think cognitive decline is probably the biggest risk factor in not having those sort of family supports in place to prevent that from happening, to help folks with their sort of, day-to-day paying bills, paying rent, things like that.
So when you look at the system now, to what extent are we addressing this population problem with current policies?
Well, I think, the issue is that folks, the traditional shelter system, and I really want to highlight how wonderful shelter workers are. They really are heroes. But, shelters, the model traditionally has been a transitional place to live while you can get folks back into work, back into independent housing. And that model just doesn't work for older adults. And so, folks aren't going to go in their 60s and 70s and into work, and they can't really move back into independent housing. And so we really, there aren't enough services in place right now that's sort of fitting this growing demographic of older adults that are experiencing homelessness. And indeed, there's just really limited resources and services across the country for them.
So what should or could solutions look like then?
Well, I think there's a few things that we need to look at. So one is that, there's a lot of barriers to accessing long-term care. So we as Canadians think of our systems as universal, but, folks who are not documented, folks who have sometimes, alcohol dependency, other substance dependencies are excluded from long-term care services. So we really need to look at any of the sort of policy barriers that exclude people from long-term care. We also need to think about these new models where they're sort of supported housing. People can live, the long-term care facilities can't scale at the level that would be needed. So we need to look at these sort of in-between models where folks might be living in a modular unit, but have some nursing support, make sure that they take their medicines and stay well and stay out of emergency rooms, don't fall, for example. And then indeed, I think if we are going to end up with shelters providing more clinical services, which really we want to avoid, we do not want people to live out their lives and die in the shelter system. That is not what it's intended for. But if that is the only model available, we're going to have to staff shelters more with healthcare services because they just aren't right now. And so we're asking folks to take on working as healthcare workers when that's not part of their mandate.
Thank you very much for giving us the top line out of your research. Much more to read and learn from. Appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Via Zoom from South Africa, that's Dr. Stefan Baral. He's a family and population health physician at Inner City Health Associates in Toronto and author of the study we've been talking about the number of aging adults in the shelter system. So we're a little late getting to the news. It is 6:31 and you're listening to CBC.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. And at 6:31, it is 8 degrees. It's a cool start and still lower than seasonal. The normal high is 21 today. We're hoping to reach 19 this afternoon. People in 30 homes surrounding Birchwood Terrace remain on evacuation watch. This after that 5-story apartment complex on Portage Avenue was evacuated nearly 2 weeks ago because of unsafe conditions. The city notified neighboring homeowners, saying they may have to leave as well with very little notice. Officials have previously said an evacuation could happen if or when the structural condition of the apartment building on Portage Avenue requires. Mike Dumka and his family are not too worried, but they are prepared to leave if they have to.
The way that was kind of framed for us is if the repairs go wrong and the building comes down, that's when we would tell you. And they said we'd give you 10 minutes notice.
The evacuation alert will remain in effect until further notice. The city says it will stay in touch with homeowners. Well, affordable housing projects in Winnipeg could get some financial help from the city. A recently proposed grant program would offer incentives of up to $60,000 a unit for downtown projects. It's part of the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, which gave the city more than $120 million to speed up housing construction. Property and Development Chair Sherry Rowlands says the city needs many units to make a dent in the demand for housing.
Housing Accelerator Fund is to address essentially what is shovel-ready projects that are underway, projects that might have been permitted as late as last December, and to get those units out the door by essentially providing some top-ups to the economics of the project.
The Executive Policy Committee at City Hall will debate the idea of the grant program at its meeting this week. In what will be one of the most watched economic updates in recent months, Statistics Canada is releasing its April inflation numbers this morning.
This report is definitely a big one. It may well decide whether the Bank of Canada cuts in early June.
That is BMO economist Doug Porter. The national inflation rate is currently 2.9%. Most analysts agree if we see it continue on its downward trend, an interest rate cut is possible as early as next month. However, one factor that could stand in the way is gasoline prices. Gasoline has been on the rise in recent weeks, and it could delay the Bank of Canada's plans to start building to bring down interest rates. In Iran, a funeral procession is underway right now to honor the president who died Sunday in a helicopter crash. Large crowds of mourners gathering around the body of Ibrahim Raisi and the others who died in that crash. A public memorial will be held in the capital, Tehran, tonight. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Well, you may not be able to hear us for a few hours later today. CBC is doing repairs on its Winnipeg over-the-air TV signal for 4 hours today, and that work between 9 this morning and 1 this afternoon is expected to also disrupt 89.3 radio signal. So that's CBC Radio 1 between 9 and 1 today could be disrupted. The Edmonton Oilers are advancing to round 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
The Edmonton Oilers are headed to Dallas for the Western Conference Final.
Last night, the Oilers beating the Vancouver Canucks in Game 7 of their second-round series. The final score was 3-2. Edmonton now is the last Canadian team in the Stanley Cup playoffs after eliminating Vancouver. The Florida Panthers and the New York Rangers are competing in the Eastern Conference Final. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers went into enemy territory yesterday for the first preseason game of the year, but they did not come out victorious. The Saskatchewan Roughriders beating the Blue and Gold 25-12. Many of the Bombers' key players, including starting quarterback Zach Calera, stayed in Winnipeg. The game gave coach Mike O'Shea a chance to see some of the team's younger players in action.
We're going to have a lot of difficult decisions, and I don't think it's fair to make them now. I think, we'll keep this process going for, 8 or 9 more days and see where it leads us.
The Bombers get a week and a half to get ready for their next preseason game. That's when Winnipeg hosts the Calgary Stampeders on May 31st. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Am I the only one that's shocked that it's this time of year already, Heather?
It seems to be flying by, but I'm really happy the CFL is back. But yeah, it seems like it's early to me.
Right? It's just like, what is going on? Oh yeah, we're after May long weekend already. Heading into June, thinking about grads, all that stuff. Just wild. It is 6:37 a.m. On your Tuesday, May 21st. Hopefully you had a good long weekend if you were off. Let's get into what's happening in our regional forecast today. Here's Abby Adiyemi.
Good morning once again. Currently in the city, it is 8 degrees. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today, and that winds that's what's going to be coming from the north near the noon period. Today's high will reach 19 degrees, and tonight it will stay mostly cloudy with a chance of showers and will deep down to 10 degrees. Heading west to Brandon, it's a bit cooler at 6 degrees. For folks in Brandon, you will be seeing some fog patches this morning that will be dissipating, giving way to a mix of sun and clouds. And watch out for possible showers this afternoon and a risk of thunderstorm. You will reach a high of 20 degrees. Moving north to Thompson, where it's currently 0 with light snow. For folks up there, you should be expecting a mix of rain and snow later today with a high of +3. Now, further north in Churchill, it is -3 degrees, though mainly sunny. The wind will be picking up a bit, and then you will touch a high of 2. Down in Dauphin, it is mild at 6 degrees with cloudy skies and some fog patches you woke up to this morning. Now, those fog patches will be dissipating, and there's a chance of showers and even thunderstorm later today, but the highs is forecasted for 16. In Gimli, it's already pleasant at 4 degrees. The Interlake region is already enjoying some sunny stats. That would be, it's going to be a transition into a mix of sun and clouds later, and we'll be seeing a high of 16. Steinbach is currently sitting at 5 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Also expecting a sunny start later. We're going to see a mix of sun and clouds and then hit a high of 19. And finally in Morris, it is 7 degrees and partly cloudy. The Pembina Valley region will also be enjoying a mix of sun and clouds today and hitting a high of 20. Winnipeg, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds with a high of 19.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
The commute.
So far, pretty smooth, but if you do see something going on, give me a call on that CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
How was your weekend? Get up to anything fun with the family?
Oh,
you were off as well,
we
like
were
I was?
out and about all over the place. We spent a lot of time in Assiniboine Park, actually. Went to the Leaf when it was raining, and then when it wasn't raining, we went to the English Gardens and just let our little dude run around with his cousins. It was really cute.
Beautiful. Was it busy in the parks, I bet?
Yeah, no, it was bumping. It's one of those kind of days you dream of, just like in wintertime when you see everyone out and about, running around, people playing music and just hanging out in the field. It was so nice.
You had to do things through the raindrops. I know I had a beautiful golf game over this weekend as well, but it, except when the ball landed, it was like you could actually hear a splash.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a water hazard. It was just on the fairways because we got so much rain.
Yeah.
Some of the local courses, actually, the city courses were closed over the weekend. They just couldn't keep up with how much rain there was.
Yeah, I just got tired of putting rain boots on our guy, so we just got him like little mini Crocs, and he just wears it in whatever conditions now. It's great.
You just hose him off.
Yeah, because he just wants to hop in the puddles all the time. We're like, nah, we'll just let your feet get wet.
Time right now is 20 minutes before 7 a.m. I'm Marcy Marcusa with Corey Funk, Abby Adiyemi, and Brad Lilly's on the program this morning, as well as Heather Wells in our news department. Crystal Lee Ramlakan is here as well. It is time for our business news. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So the U.S. has announced it will be hiking tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and other related goods. What's Canada's reaction to this been?
Well, the federal industry minister says Canada is considering all measures. So Francois-Philippe Champagne wouldn't rule out Canada imposing similar tariffs in an interview with CBC on Friday. He said it's fair to say that everything is on the table to protect our industry and our workers, and he says we're working in sync with the United States. Now, the tariffs are to be phased in over the next 3 years, and those that take effect this year cover EVs, solar cells, syringes, needles, steel, aluminum, and more. And there are currently very few EVs from China in the U.S. right now, but American officials worry low-priced models made possible by Chinese government subsidies could flood the market soon. So the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association and the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers Association believe Canada should implement similar trade levies. They believe the two countries' policies need to align to strengthen the North American auto supply chain. Now, the minister says Canada will not be a backdoor for China. The federal government has partnered with provinces to attract investments from major automotive manufacturers to spur electric vehicle production here in Canada. So the latest, a $1.6 billion electric vehicle battery plant in Port Colborne, Ontario. Now, China has maintained these U.S. tariffs are a violation of international trade rules. And Marcy, it's not clear how the country is going to respond at this point.
Let's go to another story. A few weeks ago, you told us about how a restaurant, Red Lobster, was in trouble. What's the latest?
Yeah, well, the business has now filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The 56-year-old seafood chain made the filing days after closing dozens of restaurants. But Red Lobster says some of its 600 restaurants will continue to operate through the bankruptcy proceedings, which are intended to simplify operations, close locations, and pursue a sale. Now, Red Lobster has 27 restaurants here in Canada as well, and the company has 36,000 employees in Canada and the United States. But the company hasn't clarified what exactly is going to happen with the Canadian operations yet. Now, Red Lobster plans to sell its business to an entity, though, formed and controlled by its lenders. It says restructuring is the best path forward to address financial and operational challenges. Now, the founder says the bankruptcy is a culmination of 2 decades of trouble at Red Lobster, which has struggled with increasing competition from faster, cheaper chains such as Chipotle and Panera. So in 2003, the company lost millions of dollars in an all-you-can-eat endless crab promotion when crab prices rose. And 20 years later, this past fall, the chain did the exact same thing with the ultimate endless shrimp promotion. So the chain lost $76 million last year. Annual guest counts have been down 30% from 2019, and the restaurant has had trouble bringing in younger customers. So a liquidator has announced it will be auctioning off the equipment of more than 50 locations that were recently closed. The closings span across more than 20 states. And the founder expects Red Lobster's footprint to shrink by 1/3 to 1/2 as part of the bankruptcy process. And he says many potential buyers are just interested in the chain's real estate.
Well, when you think about where they're set up, I mean, in Winnipeg, they're in some prime locations for sure. Finally, why are some Coca-Cola customers feeling like a new bottle design is hitting them in the face?
Well, the new attached bottle cap has literally been hitting people in the face.
Really?
Yes, when people are drinking. So, when they bring the bottle to their face, the cap is still on. So it's kind of like scratching either their nose, if they have that way, or the other way, maybe the bottom of their lip.
Got it.
Yeah. In 2021, the beverage giant introduced a design that connected some of its plastic bottles to their caps as a test in Germany and Spain, and then expanded to other European markets. And the company says the chain helps more caps get recycled with their bottles rather than thrown out. So it also complies with a European Union directive set to take effect this summer. So that's also pushed Coke's rivals to follow suit. So other bottles, are being designed maybe similarly as well. Now, some customers say the connected bottle caps, as I was saying, scratch their noses as they drink, and it can be difficult to completely reclose the bottle. But others say, well, it's easier to recycle the whole bottle now and not lose your cap. But, this change really highlights the gap between what customers, marketing departments, and environmentalists consider optimal packaging, especially once. So Coca-Cola says its consumers tests found that people were generally supportive of the new design, especially once they understood the recycling reason behind it. And the European Commission says the way companies complied with these regulations was up to them. And it says the law doesn't impose a specific design.
Everyone's going to rip it off, though. That's the whole thing. You'll be back to where you started if it is annoying people. So they'll have to figure out the design for sure.
Yeah.
With the flip top. Well, what's going on in markets today?
In Europe, markets are lower as positive momentum fades. Germany, the UK, and France are all down. In Asia, stocks are sliding. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are also all down. Oil is down $1.35 to $78.45 US per barrel. Gold is down $16.80 to $2,422.20 US per ounce. And the dollar is just slightly down 0.01 of a cent to 73.39 cents US.
All right. Thank you, Krista Lee.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That's Krista Lee Ramla, Canada Business News. Should say with our business news. 8 degrees, mostly cloudy in Winnipeg, a high of 19 today. So nice day. Bet you wish this was over the weekend on one of those rainy days if you were out camping or doing something that required to be outside. We did have some nice weather, but today looks pretty decent. However, the nights are going to be cool this week. So tonight mainly cloudy, low 10. Tomorrow some showers expected, and then lows of 3 degrees Wednesday into Thursday. But for right now, it is 8 degrees and cloudy. Brandon's mostly cloudy, 7. Light snow falling up in Thompson, and it is 0. Well, have you noticed this growing trend on social media? There's videos right now of young women showcasing cooking, cleaning, baking, and homemaking skills. It's dubbed Tradwives, like traditional wives. Now, some of the influencers have millions of followers. Carleton University English professor Sarah Briette has a look this morning at what's behind this growing movement.
A Tradwife is a social media influencer who promotes traditional marriage and traditional gender roles, basically split along the lines of the woman as the conventional housewife and the man as the breadwinner. There's a lot of content that it relates to the Tradwife movement, but isn't necessarily explicitly identified with it. And they tend to get kind of commented on and stitched into a larger narrative about how society has changed and the value of looking back to the way things were done before. A lot of the content that Tradwives produce has an aesthetic appeal that isn't necessarily about, being a stay-at-home mom and homemaker, but is about just the appeal of sort of process in the kitchen or in the home. There is also a kind of appeal for younger audiences and the idea of not going to work. I think especially during the pandemic, and we know that, TikTok and the pandemic are kind of go hand in hand. There was a sort of generalized sense that there's something really nice about just staying home and doing things in your home. And some Tradwife content just appeals to that same impulse, I think. The political side of this has to do with naturalized gender roles for women. So there's a sort of assertion that a particular kind of femininity and a particular role in the home is, God-given or biological or natural or essential. And that this is, the only path to happiness for women is to sort of fulfill this role. Otherwise, they're being unnatural and betraying that. One of the Tradwife sort of mantras is femininity over feminism. The society that most of us live in North America, certainly now, it's not possible to keep one adult from a household out of the workforce. They're promoting something that for a lot of people is just not even economically feasible. So they don't have a reasonable choice about staying home.
That's Sarah Briette, English professor at Carleton University. She's written books about the Tradwife movement, and there she was explaining exactly what it is, giving some analysis to what is being dubbed Tradwives on social media. Some of the influencers have millions of followers. So is this a step forward? Is this a reclaiming of something? Is this an acknowledgement? Is this a step back? What are your thoughts on hearing this? And in particular, if you would want to weigh in, what are your thoughts on hearing this as a woman, as this has been positioned as Tradwives? 788-3205 is our listener line.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
It is right now 10 minutes before 7 o'clock. You're listening to the Tuesday Morning Show here, Information Radio on CBC, 89.3, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Well, a by-election to fill the vacancy in the Tuxedo constituency in Winnipeg will be held Tuesday, June 18th. That announcement came yesterday from the Premier. In federal politics, MPs are back after after a week-long break. They will sit for 5 more weeks before heading out into the summer for their ridings. Greeting people on the barbecue circuit, as we like to say. Now, before that, the Liberals are going to work to get as much of their agenda passed as possible. It's the time of year where we always like to look at what's on that agenda. Ryan Tumulty's with us for that. He's parliamentary reporter with the National Post. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do these final weeks usually look like before everybody leaves for the summer?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, we call them silly season up here. It's a lot of midnight sittings. It's a lot of long hours. It's a lot of procedural delays as the opposition tries to prevent the government from passing legislation. And, you know, the government is working full tilt to get everything it can across the finish line before the summer and before that extended break. You know, they want their major bills to get into the Senate before the summer recess.
Well, let's remind everybody what are the top pieces of legislation.
So I think for the Liberals, there's 2 big bills that they really need to get through. One is the bill that implemented everything from the fall fiscal update, and the other is one that is the budget implementation bill. Those 2 bills are really significant. Everything that the Liberals have sort of promised for helping Canadians is in those bills. And so, I think there's a real push to get them across the finish line for the Liberals.
What's the top priority?
You know, I would think it's probably that fall fiscal update, only because it's been waiting so long, right? It was introduced back in November, and it's just really grinded its way through the House. And there are a lot of components of it that, people are waiting for. So just to pick one at random, that fall fiscal update included a provision to allow people who build apartments to get a rebate on the GST they pay. The Liberals have said that measure will be retroactive to when they announce the bill. But I think there are a lot of, developers who don't want to get too far ahead of the legislation. They want that bill in place before they start spending money. And so, that is a big concern for them. And of course, it's a big concern for the Liberals because it targets that housing affordability issue. They want to see apartment construction happening everywhere aggressively. But, some apartment developers are probably waiting to see that bill in its final form.
Let's look across the aisle. The Conservatives in the coming weeks, what are you expecting them to be pushing?
Yeah, I think they'll stick with what's been working for them, right? They have this 21-point lead. I don't think they're going to change their approach now. So I'm sure they'll be talking a lot about the carbon tax and affordability. They'll be talking about crime, and they'll be talking about the BC drug decriminalization pilot. Areas like that where they think there's a real fundamental disconnect between what the Liberals are offering and what the Canadian public is looking for. That is where I think their focus will be.
And the NDP?
I think the NDP are going to want to push a few things through if they can, with the help of the government, or if they can help the government do it, rather. But I think maybe top of mind is that pharmacare legislation. That was a big part of the confidence and supply agreement, and then the Liberals and the NDP actually agreed to go further. So not just create a program, but actually start having it cover 2 specific types of drugs, contraceptives and diabetes medication. So I think for the NDP, getting that legislation passed increases the chances that when Canadians go to the polls next year, there's an actual program in place that they can point to as a success of theirs, and that they can also, point as something the Conservative leader might take away.
Beyond what you've already mentioned, what else will you be watching, most closely in the next 5 weeks, Ryan?
Yeah, there's one particular debate that I'm interested to see how it plays out. The Liberals have very purposely taken one thing out of their budget, and they're promising to put it into its own separate piece of legislation. So rather than, part of the budget bill that includes dozens of measures, this one measure is going to be all by its own, and that's the capital gains tax increase. I don't want to get too far into the weeds of that, but that's this increase to what people would pay on taxes if they were to sell a second home, for example, or sell a bunch of stock. It's a tax measure that is only going to hit really ultra wealthy Canadians. It's a very small percentage, and it's people whose average income is over $1 million. So the Liberals are very much targeting that. They want the Conservatives to vote against it. The Conservatives had said they would vote against any tax increase. So certainly I think the Liberals have framed this in such a way that they are just hoping the Conservatives vote against it, because I think, that is a contrast that they want to draw with the Conservatives. So far the Conservatives have been kind of mum about what they would do on this bill. So I think it'll be really interesting to see what they do end up doing.
Ryan, thank you.
No problem.
Ryan Tumulty, parliamentary reporter with the National Post. As mentioned in local political news, in provincial political news, a by-election was announced. The date of it was announced yesterday to fill the vacancy in the Tuxedo constituency in Winnipeg. So that will be held on Tuesday, June 18th, if you live in that area. The Premier announcing the date officially yesterday. And you can read more about candidates who are putting their names forward, and also political analysis from Ian Fraze, who is, of course, our reporter, legislative reporter, online this morning. So cbc.ca/Manitoba is where you can find out more about that story and others. Well, speaking of other stories, we are coming up to 3 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM or on the app. And Heather Wells is here to update the news and have some headlines for us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, developers looking to build affordable housing in Winnipeg could get money from the city. A recent report proposes a new grant program. It would offer incentives for affordable houses and projects downtown. Support could add up to about $60,000 a unit. We're going to hear from the mayor coming up. And just a heads up, you may not be able to hear us for a few hours later today. CBC is doing repairs on its Winnipeg over-the-air TV signal for 4 hours today. Those repairs happened between 9 this morning, 1 this afternoon, and that work is also expected to disrupt our 89.3 FM radio signal. So that could impact your listening this afternoon. That's between 9 and 1. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Forecast-wise, as we've been mentioning, we are going to have a pretty decent day here in Winnipeg, a high of 19 with a mix of sun and cloud. Right now, it is kind of bright out there in Winnipeg. Lots of sunshine downtown out the window here, and it is 8 degrees currently. Tonight, I'll just mention it's going to cloud over, chance of showers, low 10, and then tomorrow mainly cloudy with showers expected and a high of 16. So we are having some nice wet weather for this month of May. In Brandon, currently mostly cloudy, 7. Thompson with light snow, and it is 0 currently in Thompson. Traffic-wise, in your morning commute, everything should be fine this morning. Please give us a call, though, if you have anything major on your route that is worth passing along. 788-3093. You can call Corey and let us know. Well, the next hour, come September, the federal government is going to require more of its employees to return to the office 3 days a week. That decision's been met with strong opposition from public service unions, so we're going to hear more about that. In addition, students from a local high school in Winnipeg are hoping that City Council will plant more trees. They want them in the Maples, in Garden City, and in Amber Trails. Stay tuned. We're going to hear from one of the students involved as they join me in studio. And as you've been hearing on the news this morning, Cranberry Portage residents were able to return to their homes Sunday. We're going to get an update on how things are going with re-entry from the emergency coordinator in the next hour. So it's all still ahead right now, the World Report. It's 1 minute to 7.
Today on The Current.
We have now a system, a macroscope to look at life on the planet, and that's super exciting.
Animals seem to have a sixth sense. You can see them behaving strangely when there's a storm coming or an earthquake about to hit. We'll hear from a scientist about what we could learn from what he calls the Internet of Animals coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Statistics Canada will release the latest inflation data in about an hour's time. That data could be crucial in deciding when the Bank of Canada chooses to start cutting interest rates. Senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong has more.
Canada's rate of inflation has been steadily falling. Since the peak in 2022, it's marched in a fairly straight line back toward the Bank of Canada's target of 2%. Economists like BMO's Doug Porter believe today's numbers will at least hold the line.
This report is definitely a big one. It may well decide whether the Bank Canada cuts in early June.
Today's report, though, will be a touch messy. Gasoline prices are up 7%, but compared to a year ago, they're down slightly. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem has made it clear for a while now he's looking beyond the headline.
As we consider how much longer to hold the policy rate at the current level, we're looking for evidence that the recent further easing in underlying inflation will be sustained.
Porter thinks that headline year-over-year rate will fall to 2.8%. Core inflation measures that strip out more volatile components are also expected to ease.
Is that good enough to get them to cut? They've talked about sustained improvement. I don't know if this is sustained enough. I think the waters are a little bit murky here.
Whatever the numbers say, they'll shape the economic landscape for months to come. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
As the Trudeau government pushes forward with efforts to make groceries in this country more affordable, the NDP are bringing attention to another measure, one the government has not pursued yet, an excess profits tax for big retailers. For more, let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, what is Jagmeet Singh calling for here?
Marcy, we know there's plenty of things driving up our grocery bills, but New Democrats believe corporate greed's at the heart of it. In a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and opposition leader Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh pointed out that the grocery sector made about $6 billion in profit last year. Because both the Liberals and the Conservatives have failed to take this on, Singh said, consumers are now taking things into their own hands, with some boycotting Loblaw stores, for example. Today, New Democrats are going to return to their pitch for an excess profits tax, something the Liberal government put on big banks but opted not to do for grocery giants in the last budget. New Democrats say that when the House returns this morning, they're going to force a debate in the full House of Commons on this idea. New Democrats believe it's a way to pressure retailers to cut prices, but it also risks doing the opposite. Big chains could simply pass on a new tax to consumers with even higher prices.
The Liberals seem more focused, though, on other measures to pressure the grocery giants. What are those?
The recent changes to the Competition Act, for example, meant to crack down on anti-competitive behavior, things like price fixing or mergers that made big chains even more like monopolies. Over the weekend, Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne said it's easier now when he's out pitching for a foreign grocery retailer to come to Canada and shake things up.
In some of these retail areas, you had these clauses in leases that were preventing an independent, for example, to come next to a big banner. And therefore, it was very difficult for them to enter. Now we've made these clauses illegal.
MPs also threatened to make the Grocery Code of Conduct law if retailers didn't all sign on voluntarily. We'll see this week if some of the final holdouts, including Walmart, are now on board.
All right. Thank you so much, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. One person has died after a Singapore Airlines flight encountered severe turbulence. The airline says the plane left from London's Heathrow Airport yesterday en route to Singapore. It made an emergency landing in Bangkok mid-afternoon today local time. Singapore Air says there were other injuries. A total of 211 passengers and 18 crew were on board the Boeing airliner. In Iran, the first of several funerals of President Ibrahim Raisi are happening today, and pro-establishment officials are encouraging everyone to participate. Iran is in the middle of 5 days of mourning for Raisi. He was killed when his helicopter crashed in poor weather this weekend. Freelance reporter Rebecca Collard has more.
Thousands of Iranians packed the streets of the city of Tabriz, mourning the death of the country's president Ibrahim Raisi. Raisi, along with Iran's foreign minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian and several local officials, were bound for Tabriz when their helicopter crashed on Sunday. There has been a massive outpouring of grief in Iran, but Raisi had a decades-long history of crushing protest and dissent in the country. International reaction has been mixed as well. Allied states and militant groups expressed condolences and praised the man who helped strengthen the so-called axis of resistance. But U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller took a more muted tone, saying official condolences had been offered.
Some of the worst human rights abuses occurred during his tenure as president. That said, we regret any loss of life. We don't want to see anyone die in a helicopter crash.
There will be 3 days of funerals, with Raisi being laid to rest on Thursday in the city of Mashhad. Rebecca Collard for CBC News, Berlin.
Charges against 9 men accused in the Mediterranean's deadliest shipwreck are being dropped. Hundreds of migrants drowned off the coast of Kalamata, Greece, nearly a year ago. Most of the victims' bodies have never been found. As Megan Williams reports, loved ones of the victims and human rights groups welcome the decision, but still want answers.
Greek authorities said the 9 Egyptian men were responsible for the shipwreck last June. But before the trial could even get underway this morning, the court dropped all charges, saying it had no jurisdiction to hear the case as the shipwreck happened in international waters. Human rights groups and family members of some of the hundreds of Pakistani victims protested beforehand outside the Greek courthouse this morning. They held up signs that read, "Drop the charges for the 9 survivors," and "Punish the murderers of the government and EU."
Yeah, it's a scapegoat, isn't it?
British Pakistani Amjad Ali flew to Kalamata last June to find out the fate of dozens of young men from his home village. He says the arrests of the Egyptians is part of a pattern of authorities going after the poor and powerless.
Those that are at the bottom of the chain have to bear the consequences of the failures of the powers to be, the people smugglers that facilitate this and bring people in. But the second is the Greek authorities.
Survivors of the wreck say the Greek Coast Guard for days did nothing to help the stranded ship, and then triggered the wreck by improperly towing the ship, causing it to flip.
If they try to help the peoples, more peoples will be survived.
Says Yasser Arafat, whose young cousin Sonia Mehboob disappeared underwater last June. Loved ones of the missing are still waiting for an official investigation into the role of the Greek Coast Guard to be completed. Megan Williams, CBC News, Paris.
France and Belgium are expressing their support for the International Criminal Court. The chief prosecutor requested arrest warrants for Hamas leaders and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel and the United States immediately condemned the move. Now France says it supports the World Court's independence and fight against impunity. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Philadelphia today speaking at a union summit. Trudeau is expected to talk about the importance of Canada-U.S. trade and the strong ties between the two countries. Canadian government ministers are spending a lot of time in the U.S. Tom Perry tells us why.
Pleased to meet you, Minister Champagne.
Nice to meet you, Minister.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
for making
Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne on a trip this month into the American heartland. Nebraska, a state where nearly 60% of voters supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election.
There's never been a better time for Canada and the United States and Nebraska to work together.
Champagne is the government's point man as it prepares for this year's U.S. election and the possibility of a second Trump White House. He's not the only minister spending time south of the border. Defense Minister Bill Blair and Treasury Board President Anita Anand were in Washington last week showing the flag, part of what the government calls its Team Canada strategy. Laura Dawson is executive director of the Future Borders Coalition. She says the government needs to be ready for whatever comes of the U.S. election and can't appear to be taking sides.
It cannot be
MAGA bad, Democrat good. It cannot be framed in partisan terms. It's got to be framed as Canada is your ally and your trusted partner.
Justin Trudeau is expected to stick to that theme today as he speaks at a union summit to delegates from both Canada and the U.S. and delivers a familiar message that the two countries are stronger when they work together. Tom Perry, CBC News, Philadelphia.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Some nice sunshine downtown after a mixed bag of weather this long weekend. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Great to be back with you on Tuesday morning. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3. Or 9:90 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Morning, everyone. Let's look at what's coming up on the program this hour. Some students are hoping for more trees. They're from a local high school, and they literally are asking City Council to plant more trees in the Maples, in Garden City, in Amber Trails. We're going to hear all about that initiative. Stay tuned. Also this hour on the program, Cranberry Portage residents, as you likely have been hearing in the news, were able to return to their homes on Sunday, now that the wildfire near the community is somewhat under control. So we're going to hear from the emergency coordinator for an update on how that went and how people are doing now as they have had a chance to sort of settle in and see what's going on in their community. Stay with us. Heather Wells is in on this bright Tuesday morning as well. What do you know about the news, Heather?
Good morning. Well, the impact of the Birchwood Terrace evacuation is still being felt by people who have homes around that apartment block. People in 30 homes surrounding the now empty apartment complex are on evacuation alert. They were told to be ready to leave their homes with little notice. This after an inspection found serious structural deterioration in the columns of the apartment building's parkade. We're going to hear from one homeowner coming up. And affordable housing projects in Winnipeg could get financial help from the city. A recently proposed grant program would offer incentives of up to $60,000 a unit for downtown projects, part of the Federal Housing Accelerator Fund. We're going to hear from the mayor coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
The forecast now in some more detail. Abby?
I see sunshine outside. That's all I can tell you. It's sunny outside, 9 degrees. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds today. It's shaping up to be a beautiful one. Temperatures are set to reach a high of 19 degrees. Now, as we move into the night, it's forecasted to be mainly cloudy with a chance of showers late this evening into the overnight period at 10 degrees. It looks like we have a bit of a mixed bag in terms of weather, so just be prepared for some possible rain because if we look at tomorrow, similar conditions, we're expecting mainly cloudy skies to start and then another chance of showers. But this morning, we're starting off with a mix of sun and clouds and temperatures will be hitting 19.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
The commute, Corey Funk?
Yeah, got a call from Jill, northbound St. Mary's, just before Canaston. I've only ever read it, never said it. There's a stalled car.
Like the card game?
Yeah, exactly. I think Canaston. Anyways, stalled car in the
Coniston, not Canasta.
Coniston. Thank you.
Coniston,
Jill
there you
called it
go.
Coniston too.
Yep.
I'm reading it again. Okay. There's a stalled car in the median lane. Keep right. If you missed it, northbound St. Mary's, just before Coniston in the median lane. So keep right to get around that. Apparently you lose a lane even ahead to construction, so it might be causing some backups for folks. If you see anything else, though, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
And if you're playing Canasta on Coniston, we want to hear from you too.
Yeah, exactly. Big tournament there, I heard.
Or Bridge on Bridgewater. I can't do a third. I don't think there's a street that starts with Rummy in Winnipeg.
Yeah, I don't think so. Sorry.
No. We are getting calls, though, speaking of which, in the last half hour, if you were with us, then you heard an item that we aired on the program talking all about this trend on social media dubbed Tradwives, as in traditional wives. Some influencers have millions of viewers, videos of young women showcasing their cooking, cleaning, baking, and homemaking, and it's tied into a bigger trend and movement. Well, we got a call about it.
Hi, my name is Mel Moore. So it makes me physically ill. It makes me want to vomit at how this whole Tradwife thing, it's like taking, 100 years step back. Like, women can work. Women can be lady bosses everywhere. all over the world. We don't need to be stagnant, kept in that lane of just barefoot and burying children and cooking and obeying and serving. Okay, it's this whole Tradwife thing. I find it so despicable.
Thank you for the point of view on the listener line. So weigh in if you have been following this trend and you've been reading all about it and all the things it's connected to and how you feel about it. 788-3205. Well, let's get into a discussion about the workplace this Tuesday morning. The return to office debate continues, including for the federal government as an employer, with several unions right now filing complaints. Now, by September, here's the context for this, the government plans for many more of its employees to return to the office. They are saying at least 3 days a week. The public service unions are arguing that the latest return to office requirement undermines collective agreements and compromises work-life balance. Ann Gomez is founder of workplace training organization Clear Concept. She also has written a book called Workday Warrior, A Proven Path to Reclaiming Your Time. And I spoke to her recently about this.
Good morning, Marcy.
So what is your view of the federal government's updated return to office policy?
Well, I'm definitely pro-hybrid. There's benefits of working in person and working remotely for all of us. With that said, I think their current model of 2 to 3 days a week in the office is a great guideline that provides each team to determine what's the optimal mix for them.
The quote from the government is they want to maximize benefits of presence in the workplace. What are the benefits connected to having workers be together in the workplace?
And there are definitely benefits of working side by side, co-located, right? So we pass each other in the halls. We have more of those serendipitous encounters that builds trust, it builds connections, that leads to more communication, better collaboration, more networking, more mentoring, more development, more innovation, all that great stuff. So we know there are benefits of working side by side.
And what about the issue, we've talked about this before, Anne, of fairness between employees in the application of hybrid work?
Right. So fairness is an interesting concept. I think different roles require different amounts of collaborative work. There are some roles that people can only do in the office. They need either some certain technology or they're public facing, right? For government roles, there's people who are kind of supporting the public. They need to be in the office 5 days a week. Other roles have much more independent work. So I don't necessarily think we need to have this one-size-fits-all model. I think we have to look at the needs of each role before making a decision on what the hybrid model looks like.
Should how much you're paid factor into it? Because there's always this discussion. That was a quick no, but it's interesting, right? There's always this discussion that the higher you go up the chain, you're paid more to be available at all times, to work crazy hours. You should be in person. You should be around your teams. There's a discussion about that. And other people are saying, well, that's unfair. That's not correct. And that shouldn't be the way we view it either. Obviously, you came back with a quick no. So I'm wondering what your thinking is around that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is some truth there in terms of the higher up you go. Yes, that's correlated with higher pay often, but the correlation that I think is more of kind of a driver of where you work is how much of a leader you are. How many people are you interacting with? So leaders tend to do more collaborative work, right? They're having one-on-one meetings, they're having team meetings, they're having cross-functional meetings, and all of that collaborative work benefits from in-person time. Can you have video meetings? Absolutely. Right? Can you communicate over email? Yes. It's more effective when we communicate in person.
Well, what concerns have the unions raised regarding the changes to the remote work policy?
So the unions are concerned about stripping away more of the flexibility that we all value so much. The unions are saying the current model is 2 to 3 days a week. You're mandating 3 days a week. Why? Why are we making these changes? And they're going so far as to say it's anti-worker.
And what is your sense of the impact that this decision could have on work-life balance?
Well, we all value work-life balance, right? So especially with this being Mental Health Month, like so many people value the ability to balance their personal and professional goals, right? So someone being able to step outside at lunch and take a walk with their dog, get out in nature, have a reset, come back to work more refreshed and focused, less stress. We know that's all proven from research that That's true. We value that very much. With that said, the proposed shift is not a big shift. The current model is 2 to 3 days a week in the office, and the government's suggesting 3 days a week in the office. I think it's more the stripping away of autonomy. That's what's getting to people.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, we have definitely proven that we can be very productive, very effective with this hybrid model. And now for the government to come and say there's this blanket one-size-fits-all model, thou shall be in the office 3 days a week and 4 days a week for leaders, it doesn't really honor what each individual team needs to thrive.
What do you think the future of hybrid work is in Canada?
I think it is definitely here to stay. And again, there are benefits of working in the office together, but also benefits of having remote time. I value being able to work from home occasionally. I value that very much. I value being able to shift my work hours as needed to accommodate personal goals. But more importantly, we've proven that the hybrid model leads to great results, business results. And so I do believe that it will stay.
Do you think we're headed for, what about the idea of a 4-day work week? There's a lot of chatter about that. Do you think we're going to see that in Canada?
Well, that's a whole other interesting discussion. It's very provocative, absolutely. I've seen it floated out there. I frankly don't see that kind of just around the corner. But, talk to me in 50 years from now, maybe we'll all be working 4 days a week.
Anne, thank you for this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Anne Gomez, founder of workplace training organization Clear Concept and the author of Workday Warrior, A Proven Path to Reclaiming Your Time.
Maybe it's the way you say my name. Maybe it's the way you play your game. But it's so good. I've never known anybody like you. But it's so good. I've never dreamed of nobody like you. And I've heard of a love that comes once in a lifetime. And I'm pretty sure that you are that love of mine. 'Cause I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you would be mine. And I see forever in your eyes. I feel okay when I see you smile. That you are the one for me. 'Cause it gets so hard to breathe when you're looking at me. I've never felt so alive and free. When you're looking at me, I've never felt so happy. And I've heard of a love that comes once in a lifetime. And I'm pretty sure that you are that love of mine. 'Cause I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you would be mine. And I see forever in your eyes. I feel okay when I see you smile. Smile. into the wind you go. Won't you let my darling know? Dandelion, into the wind you go. Won't you let my darling know that I'm in a field of dandelions, wishing on everyone that you would be mine.
Well, wouldn't you know, right after the rain, we're seeing a ton of dandelions out there already in Winnipeg. The tune here we're listening to is from Ruth B. Quick traffic note here on your Tuesday morning. Lisa called saying it's foggy in the Austin-McGregor area. So foggy out around that part of Manitoba this morning. Lots of sunshine here in downtown Winnipeg, and our current temperature is 9 degrees. Well, I'll tell you what, with a high of 19 today in Winnipeg, it's going to be a great night to open the baseball season in the city. The Winnipeg Goldeyes home opening 3-game series against the Chicago Dogs in the newly rechristened Blue Cross Park. We'll get used to saying that. Goes tonight. So lots of bums and seats. And there's 50 home games in Winnipeg for this season. Well, let's stay with hometown teams and turn to the Bombers with Scott Regerer, who's here with a story about that team. Good morning.
It's Paul this morning.
Oh,
but
Paul.
How's it going anyways?
You know what, Paul? I'm sorry. You know what happens? I'm just going to tell the listeners this so they don't think I'm crazy. The sports script that I read, tells the topics we're going to talk about so we can talk, and it never has the name of the reporter on it. So I apologize.
No problem at all.
Did you get a long weekend?
I did. It was
nice.
Gorgeous, and got to see my first baseball game. So I'm very jealous of the home opener because outdoor baseball is where it's at.
Oh, I'm totally with you. Totally with you. Although I do enjoy a good football game too. So let's talk Bombers. They got their first preseason game out of the way.
Yeah, and that's the right way to look at it. It's out of the way. It's preseason. The starters aren't playing much, if at all. And so, yeah, a 25-12 loss yesterday to the Riders. But Coach Mike O'Shea, extremely unbothered by the final score.
We're going to have an exciting football team. There's lots of stuff to learn from, and some of the stuff they'll pick up so easy, it'll just make it so much cleaner for them, right? So we still have a lot of time left. Even towards the end of this previous practice week, guys were starting to come on. So now we've got some time. We can proceed at a slightly different pace. And I just think we're going to have a lot of difficult decisions. It's a pretty exciting time for us.
Yeah, lots of time indeed. More than a week until that second and final preseason game. That's next Friday against Calgary.
Let's talk hockey. Game 7 last night between the Canucks and the Oilers. Wow, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's hard to watch when your team is out of it, but this was a heck of a series. Edmonton, the favorites coming in, down 3-2 in the series, but they win Game 6 on Friday, and they win Game 7 last night. They were actually up big last night, 3-0, and had to withstand a late Vancouver comeback. Oilers forward Leon Draisaitl, far from soaking in the win, took some issue with how close the game was.
I think we can, defend a little better at the end. But, they're going to push at some point. They're a really good hockey team over there. So for the most part, I thought we played really well. Would we like to keep it a little less stressful? Yes, probably.
On the other side, the Vancouver Canucks were a great story this season. They had a fantastic playoff run, especially when you consider that they were missing their starting goalie for most of these playoffs. Still, forward Connor Garland didn't hold back when talking about the disappointment of a Game 7 loss.
We're a game away from the conference finals, and personally, my first real crack at a cup, and a lot of guys in here's first chance at a cup, so it's tough right now. I mean, I've lost games in junior that I still stay up at night and think about, so this will hurt for a long time.
Love the honesty there from Connor Garland, still thinking about games from junior that got away. That is a guy who cares. The third round of the NHL playoffs, by the way, gets going tomorrow night. Panthers and Rangers kick off the Eastern Conference Final from New York.
You know what? When I interviewed some alumni Jets from back in the 60s, they both said you remember the losses more than the wins, unfortunately. Just stays with you, sports.
Yeah. Well, and I take his point, especially Vancouver, a younger team.
Yeah.
He's a younger player. And
Yep.
yeah, when you don't get those chances very often, you start to appreciate how rare they are.
Well, let's end with a historic win. Let's go from hockey to rugby. It was history making for the Canadian women's team.
Yeah, I mean, they had they went into this Pacific Four Series final on Sunday against New Zealand. New Zealand playing on home soil. Canada had never beaten the Kiwis. Yesterday, though, a different story, a 22-19 victory for Canada. For a sense of what it meant to the team to beat New Zealand for the first time, listen to Prop Dalika Menon.
I'm just so excited for the team. We worked so hard for the last, it feels like forever, and having this outcome, it was just such a great week with the girls, and it was just about putting our best out there and just performing, and we tried to go out and have a lot of fun, so just to have this outcome is just amazing.
A great moment for the Canadians. They are now the second-ranked rugby team in the world.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Marcy.
Paul McGowan with Morning Sports. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is sunny out there. It's 9 degrees right now in Winnipeg. We're headed to 19 under a mix of sun and clouds, and we're expecting to see a little bit of a cooler day tomorrow. The impact of the Birchwood Terrace evacuation is being felt by neighbors. People who live in 30 homes surrounding that now empty apartment complex on Portage Avenue remain on evacuation alert. They were told May 9th to be ready to leave their homes with little notice after an inspection found serious structural deterioration in columns of the apartment building's parkade. Mike Dumka feels like his home is safe enough because it's a distance away. And while he remains on evacuation watch, his thoughts are with the 250 people forced out of their apartments at Birchwood Terrace.
It's just very sad, and it's just, you get a little angry, right? Because you're like, how the heck does this happen? How does a building get into this state, right? But those people are the ones that are we're more worried about than anything else.
The city says it will notify people in nearby buildings if an evacuation is necessary. Officials say they will also check in periodically with the homeowners. Developers looking to build affordable housing in Winnipeg could get money from the city. A recent report proposes a new grant program. It would offer incentives for affordable housing and projects downtown. Support could add up to $60,000 a unit. Mayor Scott Gillingham says the program is part of the city's efforts to speed up housing production.
The goal of this initial round of Housing Accelerator funding is to get more affordable housing units built and more projects built downtown. And this dovetails with our Centre Plan 2050 that focuses on increasing the population of people living in the downtown.
The program's part of more than $120 million the city received from the federal government's Housing Accelerator Fund. In what will be one of the most watched economic updates in recent months, Statistics Canada is releasing its April inflation numbers this hour.
This report is definitely a big one. It may well decide whether the Bank of Canada cuts in early June.
That is BMO economist Doug Porter. The national inflation rate currently is 2.9%. Most analysts agree if we see it continue on its downward trend, an interest rate cut is possible as early as next month. However, one factor that could stand in the way is gasoline prices. They have been on the rise in recent weeks. One person has died after a Singapore Airlines flight encountered severe turbulence. The airline says the plane left from London's Heathrow Airport yesterday en route to Singapore. It made an emergency landing in Bangkok mid-afternoon today, local time. Singapore Air says there are other injuries. A total of 211 passengers and 18 crew were on that Boeing airliner. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Last week's tornado warning for southeast Manitoba is a wake-up call about the possibility of dangerous weather on the way. Jason Small at the Canadian Red Cross says in severe storms, it's important to designate a safe spot in your home. He says it could be a basement or anywhere away from outside walls. Small also says it's important to designate a meeting place.
If you are separated as a family, where are you going to meet? Who might you be able to stay with, or what home might you go to? Also, with your neighborhood, like know your neighborhood and maybe know somewhere else you could go, or also maybe somebody in your neighborhood possibly an older person who might need help.
Small says an emergency kit should include food and medication, but also important documents like birth certificates and insurance policies. Well, you may not be able to hear us for a few hours later today. CBC is doing repairs on its Winnipeg over-the-air TV signal for 4 hours this morning, beginning this morning at 9 and wrapping up around 1 this afternoon. And that is expected to also disrupt our 89.3 FM radio signal. The blue and gold came up short yesterday in Regina. The first preseason game of the year saw the Winnipeg Blue Bombers beaten 25-12 by the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Winnipeg, though, did not play 11 starters, including quarterback Zach Collaros. Backup quarterback Chris Strevler has been out of the game for a year and admits to some preseason jitters yesterday.
I don't know if it's nerves, excitement, butterflies, but all of it, right? And it's exciting, and that's how I know I'm ready to go, and especially putting that blue back on, even though it's a preseason game, it still means something.
The Bombers get a week and a half off now before the second preseason game. The Calgary Stampeders are in town on May 31st. You can find more news updated throughout your morning. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
7:35 a.m. Abby, did you get your motorcycle out this weekend through the raindrops? Or?
No, not till today. It's been sitting, it's been covered like for 2 weeks, but I had to bring it out today.
Right?
Just to catch that,
I know.
The break, because again, it's going to rain tomorrow.
People might be bummed a little bit this morning if you're heading back to work and maybe you were out camping or doing something outside this weekend and waiting for that solid good weather, and it kept going up and down and raining and then windy and then sunny and then not. Today actually looks pretty straight ahead and nice.
Sounds like a page from a storybook I read to my nephew. It goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Currently, it is 9 degrees in the city. We're having a mix of sun and clouds for today, and the high will be reaching 19 degrees. Tonight will be mostly cloudy, and a 30% chance of showers overnight will dip down to 10 degrees. As we head west to Brandon, where it's 7 degrees and mostly cloudy at the moment, folks are reporting some fog patches along that axis, and those fog patches will be dissipating, transitioning to a mix of sun and clouds later. And there's a 30% chance of showers this afternoon and a risk of thunderstorm also coming with that. Would see a high of 20 for folks in Brandon. Moving on to Thompson, where it's still at 0. We are seeing that light snow currently, and it's going to be switching to light snow mixed with rain this afternoon, and we will be touching a high of 3. Further north in Churchill, it is now -2 degrees, mainly sunny over there. Forecast remains sunny with northeast winds gusting this morning, and the highs is forecasted to reach 2 degrees. Down in Dauphin, we are at 6 and cloudy, and some fog also for that region, but the fog patches will be dissipating, and then a transition to mainly cloudy conditions, and a 60% chance of showers with a risk of thunderstorm late in the afternoon. The high would reach 16 degrees. In Gimli, it is 6 degrees, enjoying some sunny conditions at the moment. The Interlake region should expect a mix of sun and clouds near the noon period, and the high is forecasted to reach 16 degrees. Now, Steinbach is sitting at 7 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Also, we'll be seeing a mix of sun and clouds today, and a high of 19. And in Morris, where it's 8 degrees and partly cloudy, the Pembina Valley region should be seeing a mix of sun and clouds with the highs touching 20. Forecast for Winnipeg today, a mix of sun and clouds, a little bit on the cool side, and the normal high for this time of the year is 21, but today we're just headed to 19.
We'll get close. We'll get close.
What was that?
Let's get into the morning commute. We did have an issue, or at least somebody alerting us about fog. Is that right, Corey?
Yes. So Lisa called. She was driving on a gravel road near the McGregor-Austin area. Said pretty thick fog going on there right now. So heads up if you're driving around there. Might be a bit foggy. Here in the city, got a call from Jill. Northbound St. Mary's just before Coniston. I said Conaston earlier. That's a card game. Coniston. There's a stalled car in the median lane, so keep right to get around. That might be causing some backups for folks. But if you see something else going on, give me a call on the CBC Commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
So Corey Funk, here's let's share with the listeners something that I know about you and I know about me.
Uh-oh.
Tree lovers.
Yes.
Like huge tree lovers, both of us.
Oh, totally.
When Corey and I were recently on the road, we did a number of road trips. So we were in northern Manitoba, southwestern Manitoba twice, all around Lake Manitoba. And every time we go, I have pictures on my phone of trees. If you're driving, I'm out the window taking the tree pictures.
I know. I'm like,
everywhere.
Marcy, get your head back in there. You get
trees. We once did a story actually in the city on trees in your neighborhood that meant the most to you and people worried about trees in their neighborhood. Well, the next story on our show is all about someone who wants more trees in their neighborhood. If you live in one of Winnipeg's lush tree-filled neighborhoods, then you might take this for granted. But a group of students from Maples Collegiate say that's not the case for them. The grade 10 geography class actually sent a letter to the mayor and city council saying they need more trees in their neighborhood. So they looked at specific coordinates as well where trees could be planted. So beside Maples Collegiate, Amber Trails Park near Strasbourg Drive. That's in an area as well, a third area by Garden City on Durward Street. But why is this important to them? Well, Riz Laburada is a grade 10 student at Maples Collegiate, part of the project, and in studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
So I totally wasn't sort of saying that just because we were coming in. I really do have a deep love of trees. Well, for you, why was it important when you were thinking about wanting more trees?
Well, we wanted to think of a brighter future for us because we're grade 10 students. We're in high school. All we're thinking about is our future. Trees are like a good way to guarantee a brighter and a cleaner future for us. This project was important to us because we wanted to secure that future.
And is it, when you're thinking about it, is it how you physically feel when you're around trees in the neighborhood?
Well, trees do help, like, when you go outside, like, your mental health improves, but it's also, like, such a beautiful thing knowing that, like, there's, like, nature all around you.
And when you and the other students were thinking about this for your neighborhoods and for your project in your class, were you also thinking about the greater issues of like the earth and climate change and things and wanting to see green?
Yes, 100%. That was one of the bigger topics that we were thinking of, is that if we plant more trees here in Winnipeg, this could spread to other cities, other countries, and they take more initiative to plant more trees.
When did you notice, or how did you notice that there weren't that many trees in your area? Because you guys have been very specific with this letter about where you'd like to see more.
Well, a lot of us started taking notice to the lack of trees, mainly when we started geography class, but during winter, well, what was supposed to be winter, it came fairly late here. And our teacher taught us to kind of observe and look out and use geographic literacy, and we tried to see and we noticed that like there's not much green here.
Mm-hmm. Did it take a lot of convincing, or were all of you sort of right on the same page? Like, yeah, there really isn't. This is something that's important.
For me and for my table mates in my class, we're pretty much on the same page for all of this.
Yeah. Who decided to write a letter to the mayor? I love that you guys did that.
All of us actually. One of my classmates actually wrote to the premier.
Nice. And so in this letter to the mayor, you have these coordinates where you want more trees. Why was that important to be that specific?
Because you can't just say, oh, put it in this area, because they could just put it anywhere they wanted, put it somewhere that's, maybe not as effective or maybe not as important. So we wanted a place that really place that we meant to us.
And how did you choose the locations? Was it part of what you were just sharing around what you were learning in geography class?
Yeah, but we also went on walks. We went on walks to see, there's families here. Like, a lot of us chose parks and schools because there's lots of families, there's lots of students there. And we were like, this place could use more. People need more here.
What kinds of trees have you asked to be planted?
Several types. Like, one of the ones that a classmate of mine had wrote about were chestnut trees.
Tell me a bit more about that, because you actually have sort of research behind, I think it's the soil science or something around chestnuts, right?
Help with nutrient cycling, because leaf litter helps with nutrient cycling, but also when they have like deep roots, it helps with the stability of the soil.
If the mayor is listening right now, he sometimes listens to the show he shared with us. Mm-hmm. He was on last week, actually, and referring to things that he heard. So what do you hope that he understands about this and why you really think this is an important thing for your neighborhood?
This means something to a lot of people, and we want them to take into account to that, because the mayor is supposed to represent us and look out for us, and we want them to know that this is important to us.
At the beginning, we were talking about sort of the tree's impact on our mental health as well, seeing those canopies. How do you describe that? What do you feel like when you're looking up at your favorite trees and the leaves glistening in the sunshine?
I believe that it really does help with mental health, because when I look at all the trees, I think, wow, it's so beautiful. Wow, it's so amazing. Wow, it's such a gift to have.
As opposed to when you're in a neighborhood where there's nothing and there's just concrete pavement. And do you have a different feeling in those neighborhoods?
It's fairly I want to say mellow. It's kind of sad when you see less green around and more concrete.
I hope you get a response. What would it mean to you to get a response from the mayor to your letter?
Everything.
Really cool, really cool. Congratulations on your project. It sounds really interesting, and we'll let you know if we have the mayor back on. We'll ask on your behalf what he thinks of these of the idea that you come up with your classmates.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate meeting you.
Appreciate it.
In studio with us live this morning, that's Riz Laburata. She's a grade 10 student at Maples Collegiate. As you heard, she and her classmates out of their geography class project have penned a letter to the mayor looking for more trees in their neighborhood in Northwest Winnipeg. Bit of music this morning from Winnipeg's own Hearing Trees. See what we did there out of the tree interview? Their tune is called Love Oblivion.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1, local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
It is right now 12 minutes to 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. It's sunny and 9 degrees in the city this morning. Our high 19. Mixed bag to say the least in the province, though. It's snowing up in Thompson and it's 0 right now. On the morning commute, remember you can always update us on 788-3093. Give Corey a call and let us know what's happening out there on your morning drive. Well, evacuees from Cranberry Portage were finally able to return to their homes over this long weekend. As we've been reporting, more than 600 residents were displaced since May 11th when they were ordered very quickly to evacuate their homes because of a major forest fire. CBC's Arturo Chang spoke with David Tate, one of the evacuees, on Sunday. Now, while most people were relieved to be able to go home, Tate said he and his daughter and their pets weren't in a hurry to return.
Well, I mean, I believe that the front line of the fire might be under control at the road. I think it was a very big rush to get out. You know, we had 10 minutes to pack our belongings and get out. It seems like it's a little bit rushed to get back. You know, it still says it's an out of control fire. You know, and I know the first line and the responders are doing an amazing job. But I'm just a little bit skeptical of having to leave again.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you're also worried about your daughter's safety, given that she has, that smoke inhalation.
Well, yeah, I mean, the air quality can't be amazing. And, to go back and just be kind of, told to stay in the house because of air quality or whatever, that's not going to be, a really great situation for her or anybody really. But I do understand that, people want to get back to their houses and their jobs and their lives.
So what's the plan for your family now? You're deciding to stay in Winnipeg until Tuesday, you said.
Well, the government prepaid our stay here until Tuesday. So, I mean, we're going to take them up on that for sure. Whether I go back right away or not remains to be seen. I'm going to give it a few more days. And I have, my neighbor is the police chief, and he's kind of giving me updates on what's going on and whatnot. And he said he's bringing his family back. So that's, for him to say that, that's very comforting.
That was CBC's Arturo Chang speaking with Cranberry Portage evacuee David Tate, and that conversation was Sunday. So we're now Tuesday morning after the long weekend, and as you heard, more than 600 residents that were displaced since May 11th from Cranberry Portage because of that fast-moving wildfire are now slowly returning to community. Many of them are back home. Lori Forbes is emergency coordinator for the municipality of Kelsey, which includes Cranberry Portage, and we've talked to her throughout this crisis and wildfire situation. Good morning, Lori.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me this morning.
Well, I'm just wondering how people are settling in. How full is the town right now?
Well, as far as I know, everyone has made it home. All of our folks that were in Winnipeg and Brandon and into Saskatchewan have reached out to me to just, see how the water is, see, if there's anything new that I need to advise them of. And seems like everyone has made their way home.
And tell me what you mean about see what's going on with the water.
Well, I mean, it's always a concern. There's a checklist for emergency, for re-entry after an evacuation, and ensuring that the water is good is one of the items. And the water treatment plant there in Cranberry Portage never had a change in activities, and the water has been tested regularly, and everything is potable and good. The water is good to go.
And what else are the things on the checklist that evacuees are sort of taking stock of right now as they return to their homes?
Well, I think a big thing right now is what I've heard from a lot of the evacuees is they're scared. They were scared. They're still looking around. They're still waiting for that siren to go off. They're not comfortable yet. This is pretty triggering and traumatic for people. So they're still not real comfortable. One fellow said to me yesterday, he actually felt better in a hotel. He felt safe. So I told him that we wouldn't send him back unless they were safe to do so and to enjoy the day as best they can.
We've actually just heard similar sentiments from someone there who was feeling uneasy. That was from a conversation Sunday. And just even talking about the size of this fire, and even though it's moving away from community, it's still present. How many people are still in hotels then by request?
There were a few by request based on elders who needed family members to meet them at their house to assist them cleaning out their refrigerators. So there were only a few, from what I understand from the province and emergency social services, that everyone is out of hotels and at home.
Can you tell us what kind of condition the homes are in? Like, is there water damage from the, we know there wasn't fire damage, we understand, but what about water damage from, all the hoses going off and such?
Well, for real, right? There was some pumps going, sprinklers were going. I've had a report from one fellow, his septic system actually floated. So what happens is the water underneath pushes the septic system up and floats it, and he's going to have to deal with that when he gets home. Some pumps that stopped working because, the electricity was off and the generator ran out of fuel. So they're definitely assessing any damages that they have. But everyone is so thankful that their house is standing.
In the early hours of this, a lot of people were thinking about immediate things with the power going off, and some people saying they had fridges full of food or things they'd stored, for seasons. Have you heard anything about losses in that way?
I have not yet. I know we have dumpsters in the community for folks to put their, the waste in, as our dump is just locked up just till we ensure that it's safe as well. So I haven't heard about a lot of damages. I think everyone was kind of surprised that most of the deep freezes were okay. If you had a full deep freeze and it was a good deep freeze, things were still frozen because the power was restored that fast. So that's pretty good. Yeah.
And air quality, you mentioned sort of elders returning, but you didn't. You were talking more about sort of them needing a hand with reentry. Are there any issues with air quality in returning to Cranberry Portage?
At this point, no. People are actually calling me saying they can't even smell smoke in the area. You know how sometimes after a fire, you put a fire out and that wet smoke, they're not even, there's nothing. No, so far there's not even a smell.
Are there still efforts ongoing to help with the fire crews who are in Manitoba assisting, or is that calming down as well?
That's calming down as well. I'm sure, Manitoba Wildfire Services are looking after all of the people that came from out of province, ensuring that they're getting respite for their team that have worked hard. The fire is still being Cranberry Portage is safe. There's no worries there, but they just have to do perimeters and check the fire, because that was a pretty big fire. It has a pretty big perimeter to ensure that they don't have any startups on any side of it.
How do you think people might be changed by this?
Well, here's my hope. I hope that people, really remember that these emergencies can happen and happen fast, and everyone needs to be prepared to leave their house. Find that plan, make that plan for 72 hours. When the reality hits next time, maybe, just being prepared. May is Emergency Preparedness Month, and, everyone can be affected. So I think it just kind of, next time, hopefully, we can be a little more ahead of the game, and everyone was safe. So that's our end goal. We reached our end goal. Everyone went home. And it is scary, and I know there's going to be many evenings where people are nervous going to bed, but I can assure them that we wouldn't let them back in to that area unless it was safe, and it's safe.
Thank you very much, Lori, for being with us once again this morning. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Lori Forbes, Emergency Coordinator for the Municipality of Kelsey, talking about now a couple of days since evacuees have been able to return. Sunday, they started going home, 600 people in community, now that the wildfire is more under control. Now, as far as reimbursements, the province did send something out over the long weekend here as well, talking about the costs of covering the cost of staying in hotels. And they said a one-time assistance supplement will be available to those under mandatory evacuation due to wildfires for 7 days or more. And so eligible adults will receive $200. Eligible children will receive $100. Of course, there's more detail than that. You can go to the province's website if you have questions. It is 3 minutes to 8 now. Let's get into things that we understand about the news this morning and stories that are developing this morning as well. Heather Wells, what's up?
Good morning. Well, the impact of the Birchwood Terrace evacuation is being felt by neighbors. People in 30 homes surrounding that now empty apartment complex remain on evacuation alert. They've been told to be ready to leave their homes with little notice. We're going to hear from one homeowner coming up. And as we just heard, it's good idea to have an emergency kit ready to go in case of a wildfire or severe weather. Southeast Manitoba had one of the first tornado warnings of the season on Thursday. We'll hear from Jason Small at the Canadian Red Cross in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
With details on the morning commute, here's Corey.
Got a call from Kirsty, southbound Henderson, just a couple of blocks before Neil. There was a collision. It's blocking both the left lanes, leaving just that curb lane. The police are on scene and is causing backups all the way to Kimberley, she said. So very, very slow going southbound Henderson before Neil. I got a bunch more stuff to update you on after the news.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
788-3093. In the meantime, if you need to reach Corey, it's sunny and 9 right now. A high of 19 is where we're heading in Winnipeg. Well, we're still awaiting some more analysis of Statistics Canada's release of the April inflation numbers. So stay tuned. We have World Report coming up in a moment. In addition, in the program after 8 o'clock, the city of Winnipeg says that coyotes are a part of the urban ecosystem and they're here to stay. So we're doing our annual interview about how to coexist with them if you're in an area or a neighborhood where you've seen the animals. So stay tuned. That's coming up after 8 o'clock on the program. Also, I want to mention we are going to have a conversation with our new CBC Thompson Bureau reporter. So stay tuned.
On Cue with Tom Power. Joyner Lucas is a twice Grammy-nominated rapper that tackles pretty big subjects in his music. Self-harm, addiction, police brutality, racism. He joins me in studio to talk about his new album and trying to make a difference through hip-hop.
I want to just tell you I love you in case that you really don't hear it as much.
That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Animals seem to have a sixth sense. You can see them behaving strangely when there's a storm coming or an earthquake about to hit. We'll hear from a scientist about what we could learn from what he calls the Internet of Animals, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Inflation in April eased slightly more than expected. The latest data just released from Statistics Canada shows inflation at 2.7%. That is lower than many economists expected. As Peter Armstrong tells us, this new data will likely have an effect on interest rates.
Well, this is going to put some pressure on the Bank of Canada to start cutting rates, that's for sure. The headline shows steady progress, but the underlying details in this report are what's really jumping out. Remember, gas prices, they shot up last month due to a bunch of factors, supply issues, seasonal switchovers, and yes, of course, the carbon tax as well. But in spite of that, inflation pressures eased considerably. It's CPI's slowest increase in 3 years. If you strip out gasoline, it comes in at 2.5%. Now, food price growth is just one that's way down from the peak, coming in at just 1.4%, which of course leaves the shelter component that's still really driving high. In Alberta, for example, rents are up more than 16%. So all eyes shift now to the Bank of Canada. It meets again in 2 weeks. The central bank has said it needs to see evidence that this easing and underlying inflation is sustained. The question for the bank now, is this enough? Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Serial killer Robert Pickton is in hospital after being attacked in prison. Radio-Canada confirms Pickton was attacked in a common area of the maximum security Porte-Cartier institution where he is an inmate. Pickton is currently in critical condition. Corrections Canada did confirm a major assault at the facility, but the release does not name Pickton. The Sûreté de Québec says it is investigating. Pickton is serving a life sentence for the murders of 6 women. Remains of DNA from 33 women were found on Pickton's farm outside Vancouver. Today in Surrey, BC, 4 Indian nationals will appear in court. They are facing conspiracy and murder charges in the death of a prominent Sikh Canadian activist. Hardeep Singh Nijjar was shot and killed last June, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the Indian government may have been involved. Phil Plechanock has the latest.
We were able to gather significant evidence that led us to the individuals.
RCMP Superintendent Mandeep Mukher says 3 men arrested in Alberta and 1 who is already in custody in Ontario are just the beginning. He says the investigation into the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar is ongoing and involves police across Canada and internationally.
And these efforts include investigating connections to the government of India.
The 4 men are accused of conspiracy to commit murder. The Sikh Canadian activist was fatally shot outside his Surrey, BC Gurdwara last June. Investigators say it was a political assassination on behalf of the government of India. Kash Heed is the former chief of the West Vancouver Police Department. He also served as BC's Solicitor General. He says the 4 men were involved in organized crime.
Whether they were associated with a Bishnoi gang or some other organized crime group, they're basically guns for hire.
And he suspects the men are connected to other crimes across the country, including extortions in Ontario, Alberta, and BC. But he says investigators have work to do on the Nijjar case.
That theory of connecting it right back to the Indian government is going to be very difficult.
If 4 nationals did kill a citizen on Canadian soil at the direction of a foreign government, it would be a violation of international law. Phil Plechanock, CBC News, Toronto.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in Philadelphia today speaking at a union summit. Trudeau is expected to talk about the importance of Canada-U.S. trade and the strong ties between the two countries. Canadian government ministers are spending a lot of time in the United States. They're watching the upcoming election in November and Donald Trump's possible return to the White House. Tom Perry reports.
Pleased to meet you, Minister Champagne.
Nice to meet you, Minister.
Nice to
Thank
meet
you
you.
for making Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne on a trip this month into the American heartland. Nebraska, a state where nearly 60% of voters supported Donald Trump in the 2020 election.
There's never been a better time for Canada and the United States and Nebraska to work together.
Champagne is the government's point man as it prepares for this year's U.S. election and the possibility of a second Trump White House. He's not the only minister spending time south of the border. Defense Minister Bill Blair and Treasury Board President Anita Anand were in Washington last week showing the flag, part of what the government calls its Team Canada strategy. Laura Dawson is executive director of the Future Borders Coalition. She says the government needs to be ready for whatever comes of the U.S. election and can't appear to be taking sides.
It cannot be MAGA bad, Democrat good. It cannot be framed in partisan terms. It's got to be framed as Canada is your ally and your trusted partner on security, prosperity, and the strength of the North American region.
Justin Trudeau is expected to stick to that theme today as he speaks at a union summit to delegates from both Canada and the U.S. and delivers a familiar message that the two countries are stronger when they work together. Tom Perry, CBC News, Philadelphia.
The federal Conservatives are once again questioning the neutrality of the House of Commons Speaker. Their concerns relate to a Liberal Party event called A Summer Evening with the Honourable Greg Fergus. It was advertised online with remarks about Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. It said he proposes reckless policies that risk Canadians' health, safety, and pocketbooks. The Conservatives say this shows Fergus has no intention of remaining nonpartisan. They're calling for him to step down. In Alberta, deaths from a toxic drug supply are record-breaking. The data for 2023 show another spike in the number of people who died from an overdose. The province is trying to focus on recovery in its approach to mental health and addictions. But as Madeline Smith reports, the need in the community is more urgent than ever.
We've been experiencing a sort of endless wave.
More than 2,000 people in the province died from drug poisonings last year, the highest annual total ever, with the vast majority of deaths due to opioids. No surprise to Edmonton ER doctor Warren Thirsk.
Wave after wave of overdose deaths in our emergency departments across the province.
And a cycle of tragedy that never stops repeating for Petra Schultz, with advocacy group Moms Stop the Harm.
I see the grieving mothers and families rather than the numbers.
A spokesperson for the Provincial Minister of Mental Health and Addictions says the number of deaths is concerning. Their focus is on a system that supports recovery. While Schultz says more treatment options are needed,
we have to keep people alive, and that's where the province of Alberta is failing.
In Edmonton, homeless support agency Boyle Street Community Services is trying to open a new overdose prevention hub, but it's been waiting on city permits for more than a year. Boyle Street's Elliot Tanti.
We need on-the-ground supports with people on a daily basis. And I think the overdose prevention site on the south side is just the start of that.
The province says in the first 2 months of this year, the number of opioid deaths actually declined compared to the same period in 2023, and officials are cautiously optimistic the trend will continue. Madeline Smith, CBC News, Edmonton.
Many Canadians are willing to pay a hefty premium to get speedy home delivery, but some say Canada Post is not keeping up their end of the bargain. One Alberta man had to take matters into his own hands when a mail carrier made no effort to deliver his package or see if anyone was home. And as Brian Labby reports, this is not an isolated incident.
A Canada Post carrier slips a notice into Josh Kralka's mailbox.
not the parcel he was tracking and expecting.
I checked my security footage, didn't even attempt to knock or ring the doorbell at all.
Kralka got in his car to try to track down the carrier and his parcel.
I found the mailman.
Their conversation was short.
He apologized and said, oh yeah, well here it is. It's in the car.
In a statement, Canada Post says it's sorry and the package should have been delivered. The local union leader also apologized, saying a lack of resources and proper training may be to blame.
I can tell you it happened to me personally only 3 weeks ago.
Ian Lee is an associate professor at Carleton University who studied the rise and fall of Canada Post.
It was annoying. I was home.
Lee has long advocated for a shake-up at Canada Post, which lost nearly $750 million last year. He says the Crown Corporation must focus solely on parcels and e-commerce.
Canada Post is either going to reform and restructure to occupy that space, or they won't and they will die.
Kralka, meantime, isn't so sure that he'll pay the extra fee next time for faster delivery. Brian Labby, CBC News, Red Deer, Alberta.
And there is more on this story at cbcnews.ca on our main page. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, some nice sunshine and a beautiful day ahead, of course. The long weekend behind us. Thanks for joining us. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3. This is CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You might also be watching on YouTube or listening to us on 990 AM on the app as well. This half hour on the program, is it possible to live side by side with coyotes? Well, the city of Winnipeg says it's not only possible, it's necessary. The city and is hosting a free info session about that this week. So we're going to talk to a wildlife expert about it. And you might recall, or maybe you had tickets to this or were planning to go, Assiniboine Park recently had to close something. They had an extreme bugs trail that was supposed to be something you could walk through, but they had concerns about a wild coyote that caused the closure. So stay tuned for that. Also this half hour on the program, we're going to have a conversation with our brand new Thompson Bureau reporters. So stay tuned. We'll hear all about Jenna Delavich. She's going to join us in studio. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells, who is with us. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, good news this morning on the inflation front. Stats Canada's out this morning with the latest numbers saying the national rate dipped to 2.7% last month, down from 2.9% in March. And now we wait and see if that is enough of a dip for the Bank of Canada to also start cutting its interest rates. So we'll hear more about that. And developers looking to build affordable housing in Winnipeg could get money from the city. A recent report proposes a new grant program to offer incentives for affordable housing and projects in downtown Winnipeg. Those stories and more in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby, the full forecast?
Sunny at 11 in the city. We are expecting a mix of sun and clouds for the most part of the day. The winds will shift to the north near the noon period, and temperatures are set to reach a high of 19. And for tonight's outlook, it's going to remain mostly cloudy with chance of showers late in the evening into the overnight period, and we'll see the temperatures deep to 10. For tomorrow, it's just going to be mainly cloudy, and then that continued chance of showers, and the highs would just hover around 16. But today, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds and a high of 19.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Traffic, Corey.
Yeah, lots going on out there actually this morning. Let's start with the St. James Bridge. There's a stalled truck blocking the northbound median lane. Keep right to get around that. And actually, according to the Winnipeg Traffic Management Center, the northbound Kenniston backups is actually all the way to Grant. So really slow going northbound Kenniston this morning. As well, got a call from Kirsty. Multi-vehicle collision southbound Henderson at Monroe is causing big backups as well. It is police are on scene, and it is blocking the far right and left, the far left two lanes. So just that curb line you got right now. She was saying at least about 15 minutes ago the backups were all the way to Kimberley, so that may be disrupting your commute, as well as on Henderson, and St. Mary's, Monroe, and Coniston, there's a stalled car in the northbound median lane there, so keep right to get around that. And one final thing, westbound Chief Peguis, there's a barricade in the median lane right around the Rothesay underpass, says DJ, gave me a call. Look out for that. Keep right. That may be causing some backups as well. If you see something else, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I just mentioned, Assiniboine Park Zoo did over the long weekend have to close its Extreme Bugs Trail and the Kangaroo Walkabout, and that was because of a wild coyote sighting in the area. If you've noticed more coyotes around Winnipeg over the last number of years, of course, you're not alone. You're not wrong. Data supports that. In 2023, the Manitoba Conservation Officer Service logged 677 reported interactions with coyotes, and that was more than double the 335 reports the year before that. The majority of the reports are simply sightings. There's no physical interaction, but that does mean, of course, coyotes are here to stay. So this morning, we want to talk about how to live with them. The city and the province are both holding an info session called Coexisting with Coyotes. It's happening tomorrow at Bronx Park Community Center. But Janine Wilmot is with us, human-wildlife coexistence biologist with the province, for a little bit of a primer this morning via Zoom. Hi, Janine.
Good morning.
So we've spoken about this in the past, but it's interesting to hear, something being closed because of a wild coyote in the area and worries about people wandering around and being there, especially with little ones. What's the biggest thing we should know if we see a coyote in the city?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to just be aware that they do exist within the city, and it's important, I think, for people to understand a little bit about coyote behavior and how to respond appropriately when they are encountering coyotes. They are, part of the ecosystem, part of the urban ecosystem as well. They provide us with many benefits, and we do, now that we have them existing in our urban areas, it's really beneficial if people learn how to coexist with them and what steps they can take to reduce the possibility of those negative interactions with coyotes.
So help us understand what is concerning behavior for a coyote. Because if you see one in the distance, okay. If it starts to come directly toward you, or if it starts to sort of run alongside you, like, when should you worry and what should you do?
So yeah, exactly. If you do see a coyote in the distance, it's not a concern. Anytime we have an interaction with wildlife, it's really good to sort of keep an eye on the animal and see what its behavior is telling you. Also, in case its behavior changes, you want to be aware of that. So
changes
if it does
in what
approach
way?
you,
Yeah.
So there's so many different scenarios that can come into play, of course. But so if a coyote is approaching you and is still quite a distance away, like, it may still just be doing its own thing, not a cause for panic. If you do have small pets or small children with you, if you are being approached by a coyote, then those are people that you would want to pick up, just because you don't know what their reaction might be to that encounter. You don't want them to start running and cause the coyote to want to chase them. And you can simply move along your way, move out of the coyote's area. If it does continue to follow you, that is also fairly typical behavior for coyotes, particularly if you do have a dog present with you. They do view other canids as, a potential threat to their resources, whether that's their food resources in the area or potentially their young, especially this time of year. So they do tend to want to escort people along out of the area.
How do you know if it's following you, or if I golf early in the morning, and if anyone who's golfed in Kildonan Park has seen Kildonan Park specifically, or Tuxedo, frankly, at the course there, has seen coyotes early in the morning. They just are a fact of life in Assiniboine Forest and in the park. How do you know if it's sort of tracking along the edge of the woods, doing its own thing, looking for food, or if it's actually following you?
Well, it's hard to know exactly. But what I would say is, if the coyote, if you're moving through the area and the coyote continues to follow you, if it does start approaching more closely, what we do recommend is that you haze the animal. So what that means is being loud and large and until it moves off. So if you have a jacket on, you can raise that overhead to make yourself appear larger. If it still continues to approach, you can throw rocks or sticks at it to encourage it to move away, yell, don't scream, but like be loud and aggressive. You can stamp your feet, just to become big and scary and encourage it to want to move away.
Okay, so you're making noise. It's not like you're quietly backing out of the situation. And you're not running away.
Right.
Yeah.
And where you wouldn't want to do something like that, though, is if you're in very close proximity to the coyote, if you've encountered it suddenly in close proximity and it shows signs of defensive behavior. So if it's showing signs of stress, like it might be growling or snarling or something like that, you might be close to its den. And so that would be a good warning sign for you to back away from that area.
Got it.
And we would encourage you to report that to a conservation officer.
So if it is acting like you're close to its den, you said quietly back away in that situation instead of sort of stamping your feet and becoming big. Yeah. Why are we seeing more coyotes in the city?
Well, I mean, over the last several decades, coyotes have become increasingly able to exist in our urban areas across North America. So we're several generations in now in the city of Winnipeg where coyotes have started making that their home. So I think maybe I don't know that there's a significant increase in the coyote numbers per se, but definitely people are more aware of them, particularly with the incidents we had last summer. People tend to be more apt to report them, and particularly last year.
Thank you very much for a bit of a primer on this. I know obviously this is to highlight the information session as well that's coming up, but appreciate having you with us via Zoom, Janine. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is Janine Wilmot. She's a human wildlife coexistence biologist with the province of Manitoba. So that coexisting with coyotes information session that the province and the city are both working on putting together is happening at Bronx Park Community Center out on Henderson Highway. That is tomorrow at 6 o'clock.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters. News that belongs to you. Your World Tonight. Every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1. On demand on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
7:21, 8:21 a.m. is the time right now. Look at the time flying. Speaking of flying, I can't believe the date we're already at. Post-May long weekend, right? Here we are, Tuesday, May 21st, and the weather is pretty seasonal today. 19 degrees, lots of sun out there. Our daytime high is 19, that is. Currently, though, we're sitting at 11. Now, Thompson, light snow and 0 right now. So we've got that classic north-south thing going on in the province. We remind ourselves that it is still very much some chilly days up in northern Manitoba. So speaking of which, next up on the program, someone who just joined officially our CBC Manitoba team, and we're really excited to meet her on air here and introduce you to her, if you're listening, especially from Thompson. Jenna Delavich is an award-winning multimedia journalist and was recently a current affairs reporter with CBC North in Yellowknife. She is in Winnipeg right now, but she is going to be working in our bureau in Thompson over the summer months. Her car is packed up, ready to hit the road today, but before that, she's popped into our studio. Good morning, Jenna.
Good morning.
So how are you feeling about being, the bureau reporter in Thompson?
I am so excited to be hanging up to Thompson today.
And part of that is, I guess, that you're no stranger to Manitoba. You've got roots in the province, right?
Yeah, so I was raised in Lynn Lake. That's where I'm from. My father was born and raised in Lynn Lake. My mother's actually from Norway House. And I have family all across the north as well. I'll be in Thompson. That's where my sister is, and I have friends there. And I'm really excited to be back for the summer.
How's everybody feeling about in your personal circle about you, being back?
They can't wait.
Yeah, I bet.
Texting with my mom this morning. She's like, make sure you dress warm. It's snowing here. I'm like, oh, great.
I know you're leaving a nice day down south here. It's not always that way. Sometimes the north gets some beautiful days before we do in the south. But today we're kind of in that stereotypical, it's snowing there and sunny here. What do you love about the north? What have you enjoyed about sort of, life up there? And even what are you looking forward to about exploring stories?
Oh, I mean, well, I've been there my whole life, other than like adult years. I'm really excited this summer to go back and just spend time with family. Like I go mushroom picking with my mom. We go fishing in the summer. There's quadding, there's boating. There's just like being on the land and being out in nature. That's something in my personal life I'm really looking forward to, as well as just being close to family and friends for the summer. And in terms of stories, I think the north is just so so full of like rich storytelling that's often missed because there's not always reporters there, right? So I'm really excited to get out there today, hit the ground tomorrow, hit the ground this week to just really build those community connections and hear from people from the north. I know there's issues in Thompson as there's issues in every kind of community, but I think there's a lot of beautiful storytelling that could happen of just like the people there.
What kind of stories do you love telling? Like, do you have any projects lined up yet or things you're already thinking about where you're like, you're talking about exploring life in northern Manitoba. Are you a personal storyteller or do you like to investigate things? Like, what gets your blood moving?
Well, I've been in journalism for 10 years, so
Yeah.
it's kind of a mix, but I think community storytelling has always had my heart, and I think that's coming from the north. I think you see, like, everyone has a story up there. I won't be able to tell everyone's story while I'm there, but I'm excited to tell as many as I can. Some projects I've been thinking of just in the short week that I've been in Winnipeg. I know there's bathrooms along Highway 6 now, so I'm very excited to personally check those out, but as well just like hear from people and how they feel about it as well. I know Thompson is struggling with vet care right now, so that's something I'm hoping to hear from people as well. And I think I'm also just really want to hear like the lighthearted stories. Like I'm excited to go to the fishing derbies. I'm excited to go to cookouts. I'm excited to see all these community events and be there and hear from people and have their voices represented.
Just remember at the fishing derby, you can't compete because I know you fish.
I also won back in 2009.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, maybe you'll have to exclude yourself or something and not report on that particular story if you want to get involved. What's your preference of how you want to be reached, Jenna? If someone's listening and they're excited, they want to welcome you to community by email or messaging, or what's your preference if somebody has a story idea for you?
A great way to get in touch with me is always through email. So it would be my first name, jenna.lastname.delavich@cbc.com. But I also know that Facebook is key in the north. So I have a Facebook account, which is just my name, Jenna DeLavich. People can find me through that. They could add me, they could message me. I'm very open to hearing from people however they want to get in touch with me. As well, once I'm in Winnipeg, or once I'm in Thompson, I'm really hoping to work in public spaces. So I'm just waiting to make those connections. But hopefully people will just see me around town and can approach me as well.
I love that. Now, jenna.delavich@cbc.ca or .com.
Sorry, .ca.
.ca. Perfect.
Yeah.
Just checking. Have a good trip.
Thank you so much.
So in studio with us live this morning, Jenna DeLavich, our newest CBC reporter, going to be based in Thompson. So check it out. Email her if you have story ideas. And of course, I know you'll give her a big welcome back officially to Manitoba. Thanks, Jenna. It is 8:25 a.m. and everyone's changing seats on me here because Jenna's out. Janet Stewart's in. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Janet pops in at this time of day in our program to talk about the community call-in conversation that goes on between 12:30 and 1 on Radio Noon.
We have kind of a split focus today, I have to admit. It's kind of like the first day back to work after a long weekend. You have kind of a split focus. We're talking about birds, particularly migratory birds, and how to protect them. So what that leads us to is a conversation about bird feeders. If you have a bird feeder, why do you love it? Why do you have a bird feeder? And our other question is, should cats be allowed to roam free? And our if you want to weigh in on this, the number to call right now is 204-788-3797. Our guest today is Bryce Hoy, our favorite coworker. He has a background in biology, and these are both things that he's quite passionate about. He's a real birder. If you have any questions about birding as well, use Bryce. He's a resource for us. 788-3797.
Keeping the long weekend vibe going. So remember, if you want to leave a message now, that's the number. But later, if you want to call in live between 12:30 and 1, you can join the conversation.
More winners or losers? Cry if you want to cry. Can heartbreak help break records?
You want to be great? You need to sacrifice.
Do bigger fans have higher blood pressure?
How's your heart rate?
Why do we love rooting for underdogs?
Gotta support the home team.
What makes top dogs go the distance? How far will champions go to win?
I was just curious.
Does it matter if they have nothing to lose?
Is that a yes?
When you get curious, you get CBC.
In 2007, TV network CBS dropped 40 kids in the middle of the New Mexico desert as part of a brand new reality show. And if this sounds like Lord of the Flies to you, it was meant to.
We were going to prove to the world that we could make a better society than adults could.
I'm Josh Gwynn, and I want to know what this wild TV experiment was really about. Split Screen, Kid Nation, a 6-part podcast from CBC, available now.
Let's get into what's happening on the morning commute, because Corey's is getting a number of calls here.
Yeah, it's very busy out there, particularly southbound Henderson at Monroe. There has been a collision that is blocking both the far left and middle lanes. So keep right to get around that. Emergency crews are on scene. I'm hearing backups as far as Kimberly, says Kirsty. This was a while back. Still seems to be a pretty big problem. Very, very slow going. That's southbound Henderson at Monroe. As well, big backups on the St. James Bridge because of a stalled truck blocking that northbound median lane on Route 90. Keep right to get around that, but Winnipeg Traffic Management Center says it's backed up as far as Grant, and just got a call from Norris as well that he confirmed, still very, very backed up there. And finally, there is some good news that St. Mary's at Metcalfe or Coniston, that area there was a stalled car that has now been towed. So it should be smooth sailing on St. Mary's this morning. And one last thing to remind people, westbound Chief Peguis, there's a barricade in the median lane right at the Rothesay underpass, says DJ, that may be causing some backups for you as well this morning. If you see something else, give me a call. Got one more traffic hit still, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Want to mention a couple of things here. First of all, if you want to go to Unreserved Live, it is coming up fast. It's tomorrow. Just checked. You can still get tickets. You have to register. It's free, but you have to register for a spot. So check it out on CBC Online through the community events page. So Rosanna Deerchild, of course, host of Unreserved, is going to do a special live taping, and they are celebrating that Unreserved is turning 10, a decade already. Lots of success on that show, and we're lucky that it's a national show, of course, but hosted out of here in Manitoba by Rosanna. So they got some great things lined up. There's music by Métis DJ and Fiddler Doozy. There's comedy by Sherry McKay. The return of Unreserved Auntie Circles featuring Prairie Sky, Sonia Ballantyne, and Sheila Rogers, and an exploration of humor as a tool for celebrating Indigenous communities and navigating challenges. And there'll be snacks too. So Unreserved Live coming up tomorrow. Register through Eventbrite. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 8:30. Bright sky out there. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds today. We're at 11 right now. We're headed to a high of 19. People in 30 homes surrounding Birchwood Terrace apartments remain on evacuation watch. This after that 5-story apartment complex on Portage Avenue was evacuated nearly 2 weeks ago because of unsafe conditions. All the people who lived there, about 250, were forced out in just days. The city notified neighboring homeowners they may have to leave as well, with very little notice. Officials have previously said an evacuation could happen if or when the structural condition of the apartment building requires it. Mike Dumka and his family are not too worried, but they are prepared to leave if they have to.
The way that it was kind of framed for us is if the repairs go wrong and the building comes down, that's when we would tell you. And they said we'd give you 10 minutes notice.
The evacuation alert will remain in effect until further notice. The city says it will stay in touch with homeowners. Developers looking to build affordable housing in Winnipeg could get money from the city. A recent report proposes a new grant program. It would offer incentives for affordable housing and projects downtown. Support could add up to $60,000 a unit. Mayor Scott Gillingham says the program is part of the city efforts to speed up housing construction.
The goal of this initial round of Housing Accelerator funding is to get more affordable housing units built and more projects built downtown. And this dovetails with our Centre Plan 2050 that focuses on increasing the population of people living in the downtown.
The program is part of more than $120 million the city received from the federal government's Housing Accelerator Fund. Canada's inflation rate continues to fall. Statistics Canada this morning says the national rate dipped to 2.7% last month. That is down from 2.9% in March. And it adds fuel to speculation the Bank of Canada is considering an interest rate cut, possibly as early as next month. Manitoba, with its gas tax holiday, still boasts the lowest inflation in the country at 0.4% last month. A reminder today for you to be prepared for emergencies that might result from severe weather. Southeast Manitoba had one of its first tornado warnings of the season on Thursday. Jason Small at the Red Cross says it is important to have an emergency plan, including a safe spot in your home away from exterior walls. Small says you should take note of elderly neighbors who might need help if there is an emergency.
You might want to check on just to make sure they're okay too. So yeah, it is important as a family to know that if we do get separated, how are we going to reconnect? Where are we going to reconnect? And that's all part of that emergency planning.
Small says you should also have an emergency kit with food and medication, but also include important documents like birth certificates and insurance policies. Well, you may not be able to hear us for a couple of hours today, starting in about half an hour. CBC is going to do some repairs on its Winnipeg over-the-air TV signal for 4 hours today, and that work between 9 this morning and 1 this afternoon is also expected to disrupt 89.3 FM's radio signal. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers started their preseason yesterday with a loss. The Saskatchewan Roughriders beating the Blue and Gold 25-12. Many of the Bombers' key players, including starting quarterback Zach Calera, stayed in Winnipeg. Backup quarterback Chris Strevler has been out of the game for a year, and he admits yesterday he was feeling a little nervous.
It almost made me emotional before the game, just thinking about how much this means and being where I've been and being out of the game for a year. I don't take any opportunity to put the pads on for granted.
For Coach Mike O'Shea, it was a chance to see some of his rookies in action. He says the team will have some difficult decisions in the coming days, but he is excited for this year. The Bombers get a week and a half before the next preseason game, Winnipeg hosting the Calgary Stampeders on May 31st. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks for the morning, Heather.
You're welcome. Thank
Heather
you.
Wells, speaking of Yummy, and thanks to our team of associate producers, and of course our leaders in unit, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez. Speaking of Corey Funk, he's back with one more look at traffic.
Yeah, southbound Henderson at Monroe, a just a collision is blocking the two far left lanes, left and middle lanes. Just your curb lane is left there, causing big backups, at least all the way to Kimberley. So that is making for very slow conditions on southbound Henderson this morning as well. Route 90, there is a stalled truck in the left lane, so keep right to get around that, causing big backups as well, at least all the way to Grant. So very slow going over the St. James Bridge this morning, northbound Route 90.
All right, thanks, Cor.
Thank you.
Abby.
Yes, Winnipeg is going to be seeing a mix of sun and clouds with a chance of showers tonight. We're heading to a high of 19. Brandon's facing potential showers and thunderstorm. Thompson is going to see rain and mixed with snow and heading to a high of 3.
Of all the things we do on this show, I love this. I want to shout this out. Remember when the three of us were gabbing about the wave in traffic?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do you like it? Do you miss it? Do you hate it? And Abby, who's always smiling and good vibes, was like, I get mad when people don't wave.
I take it personal.
Yeah, he takes it personally. So Abby, you went out and did that story with Winnipeggers who, talking about the wave and their reactions to it and whether or not, we're losing the wave in 2024, not as polite. And it went national. I got a note from a national producer this weekend saying that conversation the three of us had, and then Abby went and did his piece. That piece aired nationally, and they're talking about it across the country now.
I've also noticed a 4% uptick in waving since that aired because everyone's afraid of Abby now.
I think so. Abby's
don't check out
behind
Abby.
you.
Yeah.
I'm watching.
Thank you, too. We'll talk to you again tomorrow morning, of course. And we will talk to you tomorrow morning as well. Thank you for listening, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, be well. And speaking of national things, The Current is coming up next on the network here. Stay with us on 89.3 FM on the app or YouTube. Talk to you tomorrow.